Chapter 285. In Qiu Zhenxing's case, Fang Zhenqi's performance was very normal. He had been following the orders of the royal family of Eastern Qi, and was a loyal character. But Chu Xiu had guessed from the beginning that General Fang was actually on the second prince's side. Chu Xiu's cheapskate father, and a few other Imperial Guard soldiers who had died in the Chu clan were all from the Vanguard Battalion. 20 years ago, they had already begun to gather treasures for the second prince. It could be said that the Vanguard Battalion was the second prince's private army. This was not a big secret in Eastern Qi. The Dragon Riders were the army that belonged exclusively to the royal family of Eastern Qi. Naturally, some of them were directly under the command of the Emperor of Eastern Qi. The rest of the princes also held some power in their hands. At present, the second prince's influence in Eastern Qi was 30% stronger than that of the crown prince. It was not strange that he had a battalion of the Dragon Riders under his command. Moreover, the second prince had been paying attention to Qiu Zhenxing's case. Qiu Zhenxing had already pledged his allegiance to him, but now Qiu Zhenxing had died an unnatural death in a strange way. The second prince, of course, had to pay attention to this kind of thing at all times. He was responsible for himself, and he also wanted to let the others who had pledged their allegiance to him see that those who followed him, whether dead or alive, would be accounted for. When Chu Xiu arrived at the manor, he found that Qiu Dongmao and the 5 freaks of Jiangdong had not left. They were still guarding outside. Seeing Chu Xiu coming, the 5 freaks of Jiangdong did not have a good attitude toward Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu was cruel and ruthless. They did not have a good impression of him in the first place. Moreover, Chu Xiu had attacked Wu Tiandong, which made them even more hostile. However, Chu Xiu had no intention of competing with them. He directly entered the manor. Before leaving, he gave Qiu Dongmao a deep look, which made the latter's hair stand on end. Only then did he enter the manor. He asked a dragon rider to take him to see Fang Zhenqi. As soon as he opened the door, Fang Zhenqi said in a deep voice, "Is there any progress in the case?" Chu Xiu didn't answer the question and said directly, "I want to see the second prince." Fang Zhenqi frowned and asked, "What do you mean?" Chu Xiu said, "Of course it's just the literal meaning. I found a lot of interesting things. Strictly speaking, the death of Qiu Zhenxing was implicated by the second prince. Don't you want to know? The thing in my hands will not make the second prince regret it." Fang Zhenqi furrowed his brows and said, "Wait here, I'll go ask the second prince." The second prince had clearly instructed him to investigate this matter thoroughly. He did not know whether what Chu Xiu had said was true or not, but it would not be wrong to report to the second prince first. Fang Zhenqi was one of the second prince's trusted aides, so he naturally had a way to contact the second prince. Chu Xiu waited in the manor for a day before Fang Zhenqi walked over and said in a deep voice, "Chu Xiu, the second prince invites you over." As he said this, Fang Zhenqi directly led Chu Xiu to a manor outside the Ji state capital. As the second prince of Eastern Qi, LV Longguang owned many properties in Eastern Qi, and this manor was one of them. To be honest, Chu Xiu was a little curious about LV Longguang. After all, this prince was very famous in Eastern Qi. It was said that LV Longguang and Crown Prince LV Longji were born only 15 minutes apart, but it was this 15 minutes that made one of them the crown prince and the other the second prince. After he grew up, LV Longguang was naturally very dissatisfied with this kind of thing, and he would compete with the crown prince for everything. Of course, he was indeed qualified to do so. The world worshipped martial arts, and everything was based on martial arts. The royal family of Eastern Qi was no exception. Crown Prince LV Longji's strength in martial arts could only be said to be average, about the same as his father. Even with countless elixirs and the guidance of experts, he only reached the inner invulnerability realm after the age of 30. On the other hand, LV Longguang's martial arts talent was amazing, and he had already reached the innate stage before the age of 20. Later, he followed the Eastern Qi military on expeditions, and had a very strong reputation in the military. In terms of ability, LV Longji was only average. As the crown prince, he held a lot of power, but most of it was handled by his subordinates. LV Longguang, on the other hand, was experienced, which made his subordinates gasp in admiration. It could be said that if LV Longji did not have the identity of the crown prince, he would almost be completely crushed by the latter. However, Chu Xiu vaguely remembered that in the original plot, the Kaiyuan Emperor Lu Haocheng was already over 100 years old, but he had no intention of abdicating the throne. Of course, now that the plot had changed a lot, it was unknown whether the second prince would be able to ascend the throne. Fang Zhenqi knocked on the door of a room and led Chu Xiu in. He said respectfully, "Your Highness, I have brought Chu Xiu." At this time there were only two people in the room. One was sitting, and the other was standing. The one sitting was a young man in his 30s with a beard and a masculine appearance. He wore a golden robe and had a powerful aura. This person was the second prince of Eastern Qi, LV Longguang. His actual age should be in his 50s, but because he was only in his 30s when he stepped into the three-flower realm, his current appearance had always been the same. Behind LV Longguang, there was an old eunuch with a pale face staring at Chu Xiu like a tiger watching its prey. This person was also a great expert in the unity of heaven and man realm. Fang Zhenqi said that you wanted to talk to me about the cause of Qiu Zhenqing's death. What is going on? If you don't give me a reasonable explanation today, even if you're from the Guanzhong torture room, Guanxiyu won't be able to protect you. As LV Longguang spoke, a strong pressure also came over. The second prince was famous for being strong. He was not joking. If Chu Xiu was really playing with him, even Guanxiyu wouldn't be able to protect Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu didn't care about the second prince's attitude. He just said in a deep voice, "Since I dared to ask General Fang to invite the second prince, I naturally have the real thing. I have already found out about the cause of Qiu Zhenqing's death. I believe the second prince also wants to know who killed the man you recruited recently, right?" LV Longguang narrowed his eyes and said with a cold expression, "Who told you that Qiu Zhenqing is my man?" Chu Xiu said faintly, "Second prince, don't worry. This is not a problem within the second prince, but I found out about it." Chu Xiu didn't want to beat around the bush when dealing with someone as domineering as LV Longguang. Instead, he told him everything directly. However, he ignored Mr. Lu's role in all of this. He simply said that he had found out everything by himself. After listening to him, LV Longguang's face was already gloomy. He said coldly, "My brother is really scheming. He actually secretly colluded with Jiang Wenyuan. He really doesn't know what's good for him." If the relationship between the crown prince and Jiang Wenyuan hadn't been exposed by Chu Xiu today, he would probably still be in the dark. Although Jiang Wenyuan couldn't help the crown prince succeed, it was very easy for him to ruin his plans. LV Longguang looked at Chu Xiu and asked in a deep voice, "Where is the evidence?" Chu Xiu said, "Of course I have the evidence, but second prince, you don't think that I will give it to you for nothing, do you? If that's the case, I might as well directly give the evidence to eunuch Wang Jin, and let him report to His Majesty. At least I will be rewarded by His Majesty." "How dare you threaten me?" LV Longguang's face darkened. The pale and beardless eunuch behind him also snorted coldly, and a strong momentum attacked Chu Xiu. However, the current Chu Xiu was no longer the Chu Xiu of the past. Even a great master in the oneness of heaven and men realm could not scare him away. Facing the eunuch's momentum, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "It's not a threat, but a deal. It's only fair to give and take, isn't it? Second prince, with all due respect, what Eastern Qi needs now is stability. It's useless for me to hand in the evidence that Jiang Wenyuan killed Qiu Zhenqing. Jiang Wenyuan will only be reprimanded. On the contrary, if I hand in the evidence that Jiang Wenyuan colluded with the crown prince and intended to provoke internal strife in the Eastern Qi royal family, then Jiang Wenyuan will be killed. It's official business for me to hand in the evidence, but if it's handed in by you, second prince, it can become a tool to attack the crown prince. Isn't this deal worth it? Of course, you are the second prince of Eastern Qi, and I'm just a small Jianghu detective from the Guanzhong torture room. I can't do anything if you want to rob me. But second prince, you are a generous person, so I don't think you would do such a thing. Moreover, I have more than one piece of evidence." After hearing Chu Xiu's words, LV Longguang's face darkened. He was a strong-willed man. If Chu Xiu took the initiative to hand in the evidence, he might reward Chu Xiu for this. But in the end, Chu Xiu threatened him to make a deal, which was what LV Longguang hated the most. However, the evidence was currently in Chu Xiu's hands, and Chu Xiu even said that he had another piece of evidence. If he were to snatch it by force, it would be hard to say whose hands that piece of evidence would end up in. Although LV Longguang didn't know whether what Chu Xiu said was true or not, he urgently needed this evidence to make his brother, the crown prince, look bad. So he temporarily swallowed his anger and said coldly, "Say it, what do you want?" A strange look appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes as he said, "I heard that your royal highness has the heaven-extinguishing earth-obliterating oblivion-killing fist from the great sorrow of yin and yang of heaven and earth. What I want is this technique." In the original plot, there were only a few martial arts in the great sorrow of yin and yang. The forget self-killing fist of the great sorrow of yin and yang was the most famous one, and it was also a martial art with great lethality. This martial art was not only practiced by one person, but many people, and its source was in the hands of this second prince. As the name suggested, the forget self-killing fist of heaven and earth was a martial art that condensed the way of killing to the extreme, and it was most suitable for martial artists in the army to practice. After the second prince obtained this martial art, he often used it to win over the experts in the army. Chu Xiu was still thinking about how to get this martial art. He didn't expect that the opportunity would come now. Chapter 286. Heaven and Earth Intersecting Yin-Yang Sorrowfu was a demonic cultivation technique that no one had gathered in the original storyline. But now, Chu Xiu had already gathered 4 of them. Adding the heaven-extinguishing earth-annihilating forgetful self-killing fist, it would be 5. He was one step closer to combining the 7 demonic cultivation techniques. However, when LV Longguang heard Chu Xiu's words, he laughed in anger. "You really don't know what you're talking about. That is one of the heaven and earth intersecting yin-yang sorrowfu. Just this one alone is at the 7th transformation level. Even under me, only those who have made great contributions will be taught this technique. You want a 7th transformation cultivation technique from this king with just this bit of evidence? Chu Xiu, you really don't know how to write the word greedy." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Your Highness, there's no need to be angry. I've said it before, this is just a deal. Since Your Highness feels that the evidence isn't worth it, then how about I add in the heaven and earth intersecting yin-yang sorrowfu? Heaven extinguishing earth annihilating great purple yang hand? Although the power of the heaven and earth intersecting great purple yang hand is inferior to the heaven extinguishing earth annihilating forgetful self-killing fist, but with this evidence, it should be enough, right?" Chu Xiu had already used the heaven and earth intersecting great purple yang hand many times. There was information on it on the Dragon Tiger list, so it wasn't a secret. Moreover, the might of this palm technique was slightly insufficient for the current Chu Xiu, so it was just right for him to trade. Chu Xiu wasn't afraid that others would learn his cultivation technique. The same cultivation technique would have slight differences between people. The most important cultivation technique was the heaven and earth intersecting yin-yang sorrowfu. It was very special. Only by combining all 7 cultivation techniques would it have the power to shock heaven and earth, and make ghosts and gods weep. Taking it out alone would only be considered not bad. Right now, the only person in the pugilistic world who had the qualifications to gather all 7 cultivation techniques was probably Chu Xiu. So he wouldn't be at a disadvantage if he took one out for a deal. A strange look appeared in LV Longguang's eyes. The sorrowful poem of heaven and earth conquering yin and yang had been famous in Jianghu for many years. It had been famous since ancient times. He was lucky enough to obtain one, but he didn't cultivate it because the heaven-extinguishing earth-annihilating selfless killing fist was too ferocious. A single punch would reach the realm of selfless killing and condense killing intent to the extreme. A moment of carelessness would cause one to be devoured by the killing intent. Therefore, only the experts in the army who had experienced countless bloody battles and experienced hundreds of battles under his command could initially control it. As the second prince, LV Longguang had plenty of top-notch techniques he wanted. There was no need for him to cultivate this kind of demonic technique. Moreover, he had never intended to collect the complete set of the yin and yang sorrowful poem. Since that was the case, trading with Chu Xiu was not considered a loss. It was acceptable. LV Longguang snorted coldly and said, "This time, I will agree to your request. However, you must remember that there are not many people in this world who are qualified to negotiate with me." As he spoke, LV Longguang stretched out his hand. The old eunuch behind him took out the heaven-extinguishing, earth-annihilating, selfless-killing fist from a secret space box and threw it to Chu Xiu. This was the original version. Of course, LV Longguang had many copies in his hands. Chu Xiu also threw the evidence and the heaven-extinguishing, earth-annihilating great purple sun palm to the old eunuch. After the old eunuch received the cultivation technique, he carefully checked it. Chu Xiu said, "Don't worry. There are no problems with the cultivation technique. I wouldn't dare to cheat your highness. Since your highness is willing to trade with me this time, I won't be stingy. When you want to make a move on Jiang Wenyuan, your highness can get General Fang to inform me. Count me in." LV Longguang played with the jade ring on his thumb and looked at Chu Xiu with a smile that wasn't a smile. "You're so kind as to help me?" Chu Xiu smiled and said, "Your highness is wise. Actually, during the God Weapon Conference, I already had a grudge with Jiang Wenyuan. I, Chu Xiu, am not a magnanimous person. Now that I have the opportunity, I won't hit him while he's down. Do you think I'll help him in his hour of need?" LV Longguang's eyes revealed a look of interest. In the end, he said indifferently, "Sure. When it's time to make a move on Jiang Wenyuan, I will get Fang Jinqi to inform you." "Thank you, your highness." After cupping his hands, Chu Xiu left. After Chu Xiu left, LV Longguang asked in a deep voice, "Eunuchly, what do you think of Chu Xiu?" The eunuch standing behind LV Longguang pondered for a moment and said, "He's bold and decisive. He's greedy and self-interested. He's not a hypocrite, but he's a true villain. In the Guanzhong torture room, be it the previous great hero Chu Kuanga or this generation's Iron Judge Guan Siyu, there's nothing wrong with their character. Who would have thought that Chu Xiu, the most outstanding warrior of the Guanzhong torture room's younger generation, would be such a person?" LV Longguang played with the jade ring in his hand and said indifferently, "What's wrong with such a person? A stubborn person like Guan Siyu isn't easy to deal with. What's wrong with being greedy? This king likes greedy people. If a person isn't greedy, how can this king subdue him? Forget it, let's not discuss Chu Xiu for now. I'll bring the evidence to father. This time, I'll make my good brother lose face." Eastern Qi's great Liang city was the capital of Eastern Qi. It was also the most prosperous commercial lifeline of all of Eastern Qi. Its area was 10 times the size of the Ji State Prefecture. At this time, in the imperial palace of Great Liang City, behind the curtains, a stooped old man was looking at the information that LV Longguang had handed over. His body trembled with anger. This old man was the current emperor of Eastern Qi, Kaiyuan Emperor Lu Haochang. He was an emperor with mediocre abilities and strength, but he had been on the throne for the longest time. It was so long that his sons couldn't help but have thoughts of usurping the throne. However, it was undeniable that Lu Haochang's existence was more beneficial than harmful to Eastern Qi. Without Lu Haochang, the entire Eastern Qi royal family would be in chaos. At that time, it would also involve the internal strife of Eastern Qi. That would be equivalent to a disaster for Eastern Qi. Lu Haochang's talent was mediocre. Moreover, as an emperor, he had no time to cultivate martial arts. Otherwise, who would he entrust the affairs of the country to? If he really wanted to be a puppet emperor, who didn't care about anything and handed over power to others, the other Eastern Qi royal family would not allow him to continue as emperor even if they used their feet to vote. Therefore, now that Lu Haochang's mental state was somewhat poor, this gave the crown prince and the second prince some hope. At least they still had the hope of outliving their father and ascending to the throne themselves. However, the second prince and the others did not know that in the original plot, the old emperor would still be alive after 20 years. At this moment, LV Longguang was kneeling respectfully on the ground, but a hint of viciousness flashed in his eyes. The evidence that Chu Xiu had given him was far from enough to topple his elder brother, but it was enough to hurt him. "Go and find me that unfilial son," Lu Haochang said in a gloomy voice. Among the previous emperors of Eastern Qi, Lu Haochang's ability was indeed mediocre. However, This mediocrity was only compared to the great emperors of Eastern Qi. As an emperor who had spent countless efforts on this position, Lu Haochang was also very proficient in tactics. Although he was not outstanding, he was definitely qualified. In his opinion, this time, the crown prince had crossed the line. Internal strife was fine, but internal strife that disregarded the interests of Eastern Qi was courting death. It was a repeat of the tragedy of internal strife in the previous generation of Eastern Qi. Crown Prince Lu Longji was a gentle-looking middle-aged man. He looked much older than Lu Longguang, but he also had a more mature temperament. At this moment, he was a little puzzled as to why his imperial father had come to find him in such a hurry. Seeing LV Longguang kneeling on the ground, LV Longji thought that he had made a mistake and angered his imperial father. LV Longji was just about to open his mouth and take on the posture of a crown prince to ridicule him. But right at this moment, LV Haochang suddenly shouted angrily, "Unfilial son! Kneel down!" Lu Longji shuddered and suddenly knelt on the ground. He heard Lu Haochang bellow, "I don't care about the conflict between you and second brother. You've been the crown prince for decades, and you have all the advantages. If you can't even hold on to this position with such a huge advantage, then I don't mind replacing you with someone else, because in the future, you will not be able to hold on to the throne of Eastern Qi. But you have to know, even if you fight, you can't disregard the interests of Eastern Qi. Have you forgotten the murder of the previous generation of Eastern Qi's royal family? It's because they fought so fiercely that it became my turn to take this position, and you became the crown prince. Now, are you going to hand this position to someone else?" Lu Longji was still confused, and he didn't know what he had done wrong. But now that Lu Haochang was in a rage, he didn't have time to think so much. He hurriedly knelt on the ground and said nervously, "I dare not." Lu Haochang said coldly, "Dare not? If you dare not, then you colluded with Jiang Wenyuan. Don't you know what kind of person Jiang Wenyuan is? If you dare not, then you let Jiang Wenyuan kill the head of the Pegasus farm, Qiu Zhenxing, just because he sided with second brother. Do you know what the Pegasus farm means to Eastern Qi? 99% of Eastern Qi's warhorses now come from the Pegasus farm. Once Qiu Zhenxing is dead, who can take this position? You ruined the foundation of Eastern Qi, and you still dare to say that you dare not." Lu Longji knelt on the ground, trembling. At this moment, he wanted to cut Jiang Wenyuan into 1,000 pieces. It was true that Qiu Zhenxing had rejected him, but he really didn't want to kill Qiu Zhenxing. This was completely Jiang Wenyuan's own decision. But now that Lu Haochang had confirmed that he was colluding with Jiang Wenyuan, it was useless for him to defend himself. So Lu Longji could only say with a trembling voice, "I know my mistake." Lu Haochang snorted coldly, "Know your mistake? As the crown prince, you don't know how to set an example, and just say that you know your mistake? Didn't you just command a battalion of the Dragon Riders' Imperial Army? Now, it seems that letting you lead the Dragon Riders' Imperial Army is a mistake. I will take that battalion back." Hearing this, Lu Longji's face instantly turned pale. That brother of his had extremely high prestige in the army, and even the general of the Dragon Riders' Imperial Army's breaching battalion took the initiative to side with him. Lu Longji had finally obtained a battalion with great difficulty, but he didn't expect to lose it so quickly. Chapter 287. Under Lu Haochang's wrath, Crown Prince Lu Longji suffered a great loss, but what was more important was his reputation. It was needless to say what kind of treatment a crown prince would receive after committing a foolish act and a grave mistake. However, this matter was not over yet. Lu Longji was Lu Haochang's biological son, and the crown prince of the Eastern Qi imperial court. He had to be punished for his mistake. As for Jiang Wenyuan, he had to pay with his life for his mistake. Lu Haochang said coldly, "Zhang Rang." A tall middle-aged eunuch in a dark green brocade robe said in a low voice, "I'm here." Jiang Wenyuan has gone too far this time. Does he really think that the Lu royal family doesn't dare to kill him? For so many years, I can pretend that I didn't see what he did in the dark, but he should never have interfered in the internal affairs of the imperial family. He should be killed for trying to touch the foundation of the imperial family. His memorial arch has been erected for so many years, and the Lu royal family has tolerated it for so long. We have not let the Jiang family down. Now that the Jiang family has dug their own grave, they can't blame anyone else. Zhang Rang, take the people of the Front Palace Department and cooperate with the Dragon Riders' Imperial Army to kill the Prince of Annal's residents. Whoever brings Jiang Wenyuan's head will be rewarded handsomely. What Jiang Wenyuan had done all these years was like a fly, so disgusting that people wanted to swat him to death. But although flies were annoying, they were not fatal. The so-called guests and hangers-on that Jiang Wenyuan had recruited over the years might be strong in the eyes of ordinary people, but they were vulnerable in the eyes of the Eastern Qi imperial court. But this time, Jiang Wenyuan's involvement in the internal power struggle of the Eastern Qi imperial family had really touched Lu Haocheng's reverse scale, so this time, Jiang Wenyuan must die. At this time, Lu Longguang suddenly said, "Father, some of my men are also in the Ji State Prefecture. They can also share your burden." Lu Haocheng frowned and said lightly, "Yes, if your men kill Jiang Wenyuan, they will also be rewarded." As the emperor, he was even happy to see the infighting among his children. There was no need to say more about how cruel the royal family was. Almost every emperor was like raising a poisonous insect. Only the winner could sit on the throne. In the history of Eastern Qi, more than half of the emperors were not born as princes. In the past, Lu Haocheng was just an ordinary member of the royal family. He had never experienced such cruel competition and slaughter, so his ability was slightly mediocre. Lu Haocheng was aware of the conflict between the crown prince and the second prince. He also knew that all of his other sons who had some ability had ambitions and thoughts. However, he did not stop them. As long as his heirs didn't cause too much trouble and didn't offend his dignity as the emperor, Lu Haocheng didn't intend to interfere. At that moment, Cheng Zhouhai, Zhongping, and Wang Qianping were in an inn in the Ji State Prefecture. At present, the few of them were in a complete stalemate. They clearly had a clue, but in the end, they couldn't investigate the case, nor could they not investigate it. Moreover, Chu Xiu and Chu Xiaoda hadn't returned for a day. God knew what they were doing. Even Cheng Zhouhai had some complaints about Chu Xiu. This time, Hall Master Guan had assigned Chu Xiu to lead the team. They felt that they had done their best. But now Chu Xiu had disappeared halfway. What was going on? At this moment, Wang Qianping suddenly revealed a strange look in his eyes. He said, "The two of you, it's not that I want to say this, but Chu Xiu's actions are a little too excessive." Lord Hall Master gave the leader position to Chu Xiu, but now Chu Xiu has gone missing. What is going on? Cheng Zhouhai narrowed his eyes and said, "Wang Qianping, what do you mean?" Wang Qianping sneered and said, "What I mean is that we can't help Chu Xiu take the blame for nothing. He isn't good at investigating cases, but we are. We have done everything we can for him. But now that we are faced with a difficult situation, this Chu Xiu has gone missing. According to the rules of the Guanzhong torture room, if the case is not solved and the reputation of the Guanzhong torture room is ruined, Chu Xiu will be punished. We can't do anything about it. Why don't we write a letter back to the Guanzhong torture room and report Chu Xiu to Hall Master Guan? If something goes wrong, Hall Master Guan can't blame us." Cheng Zhouhai frowned and looked at Wang Qianping. This guy was really sinister. Previously, he had been so calm in front of Chu Xiu, as if he didn't dare to provoke Chu Xiu. But now he was playing this trick in the dark. If they really reported Chu Xiu in front of Hall Master Guan, it would make Chu Xiu seem to be headstrong and self-opinionated. Finally, it would cause the case to be unable to be solved. Not only would Chu Xiu's reputation in the Guanzhong torture room plummet, but it would also cause Chu Xiu to be punished by Guan Siyu. Guanzhong torture room had its own rules. In other sects, talents like Chu Xiu would definitely be given some preferential treatment. But in the Guanzhong torture room, if you do well, you will be rewarded, and if you do wrong, you will be punished. It was that simple. Zhong Ping said faintly, "I won't do this kind of secretly slandering others, and I'm also too lazy to do it. If you want to go, then go." This time, he didn't contribute much to Qiu Zhenqing's case. He was only good at killing people. Actually, it didn't matter to him whether the case was completed or not. Cheng Zhouhai also looked indifferent. "Wang Qianping, I've heard about what you did in the Guanzhong torture room. Don't play this trick here. If you want to stab people in the back, you can go. I won't stop you, but don't think about seducing me to go with you. Although Cheng Zhouhai didn't think he was a gentleman, he really couldn't stab people in the back like this. Moreover, he didn't want to incur hatred with Chu Xiu because of such a small matter. Even if Chu Xiu really didn't complete the case, which caused his reputation to be damaged, and he was punished by the hallmaster, Chu Xiu was still Chu Xiu. His strength was still there. Although the Guanzhong torture room valued merit, at the end of the day, strength was the guarantee. With Chu Xiu's current talent and strength, he would definitely become a torture officer or a leader of the arrest department in the future. Why bother to offend Chu Xiu for such a small matter? Not all the cases handled by the Guanzhong torture room could be solved. There were also many unsolved cases. Cheng Zhouhai could still afford that little punishment. At least, it wasn't worth it to offend Chu Xiu because of this little punishment. Seeing these two people's attitude, Wang Qianping was a little surprised. Because from the past few days of contact, this Chu Xiu didn't seem to be very close to Cheng Zhouhai and Zhong Ping. In the end, they actually chose to stand on Chu Xiu's side. It was really strange. However, Wang Qianping didn't want to care so much now. At this time, if he didn't hit Chu Xiu while he was down, when he returned to the Guanzhong torture room, his master Yin Batong wouldn't let him off. Yin Batong's previous disciple Li Tianhao was crippled by Chu Xiu. Since then, Yin Batong hated Chu Xiu to the core. This time, Wang Qianping followed Chu Xiu to carry out the mission. His master had personally instructed him to find an opportunity to cause trouble for Chu Xiu. If Chu Xiu remained unharmed throughout the journey, it would be fine. But now he didn't mind hitting Chu Xiu while he was down and stabbing him in the back. Wang Qianping sneered. Alright, you guys are of high moral standing. If you don't want to complain, then I'll do it. Hall Master Guan is very clear about rewards and punishments. I'd like to see if you guys will also suffer when Chu Xiu is punished. At this time, the door was suddenly pushed open. Chu Xiu's figure stepped into the inn. Immediately, Wang Qianping's mouth opened wide. He almost swallowed the words he just said. Chu Xiu's face was gloomy. Say it, why don't you say it? Didn't you want to go to Hall Master Guan to complain about me? I'd like to see how you're going to complain about me. Wang Qianping's expression changed. He forced a smile and said, Official Chu, I was actually joking just now. Before Wang Qianping could finish his words, Chu Xiu had already taken a step forward. He arrived in front of Wang Qianping and directly grabbed at him. They had experienced Chu Xiu's temperamental personality before. He would attack as soon as he said he would, without the slightest bit of nonsense or hesitation. Previously, when he was facing the 5 heroes of Jiangdong, he was like this. It was simply impossible to predict. Now Wang Qianping was mentally prepared. The moment he saw Chu Xiu, the gang energy around him erupted. He retreated and wanted to block Chu Xiu. However, Chu Xiu's grab changed into a seal halfway. The great Vajrawheel seal crashed down, and Wang Qianping's pitiful gang energy was almost instantly shattered by the great Vajrawheel seal. The great sacrificial grappling hand was executed. Wang Qianping was directly lifted up by the neck by Chu Xiu. The gang energy around him was completely sealed. This caused him to instantly reveal a panicked expression. He hurriedly shouted, Chu Xiu, what are you trying to do? If you dare to touch me, the Guanzhong torture room will definitely not tolerate you. It was a serious crime to kill a colleague. In the previous competition between the younger generation, Chu Xiu had crippled Li Tianhao. It could be said that the sword had no eyes, and the fists and kicks had no heart. However, if Chu Xiu touched him now, it would be a mutual killing between colleagues. This was definitely a big taboo in the Guanzhong torture room. At this moment, even Cheng Zhouhai was shocked. He hurriedly advised, Brother Chu, calm down. We're all on the same side. There's no need to make a fuss like this. At this moment, Chu Xiu only looked at Wang Qianping with a cold gaze. He said coldly, If you want to stab me in the back, sure, but you have to be mentally prepared to bear my wrath. Now, are you prepared for this? Feeling Chu Xiu's cold gaze, Wang Qianping's expression suddenly changed. His predecessor, Yin Batong's former disciple, Li Tianhao, had been crippled by Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu's ruthlessness had a previous record. If Chu Xiu went crazy and really crippled or killed him, who could he go to for justice? Looking at Chu Xiu's extremely cold gaze, Wang Qianping's tone was no longer tough. Instead, he lowered his voice and said, "Official Chu, I was blinded by lard just now. Please don't mind me. I have a cheap mouth. Please let me go this time, Official Chu." Seeing Wang Qianping's appearance, Cheng Zhouhai and Zhong Ping both felt a little ashamed. This person was really a disgrace to the Guanzhong torture room. It was very normal to be afraid when facing a strong opponent. However, there were really not many who would lower their voice and beg for mercy like Wang Qianping. Chapter 288. As a martial artist, regardless of whether they were righteous or evil, they still needed to have a backbone. For example, Wang Qianping begged for mercy like a dog. It formed a very strong contrast with his sinister appearance of wanting to stab Chu Xiu in the back. Chu Xiu just sneered when he heard this. He slapped Wang Qianping's face with his hand and said lightly, "You know you have a cheap mouth. Next time you better watch your mouth. You need to know that a loose tongue can cause trouble." Chu Xiu's insulting behavior made Wang Qianping's face turn red. If it were someone else, they might have already fought with Chu Xiu. However, Wang Qianping forcibly endured it. He even squeezed out a smile on his face and said reluctantly, "Official Chu is right. I will remember it." Chu Xiu snorted coldly and directly threw Wang Qianping to the side. He said lightly, "Get lost." Wang Qianping lowered his head as a wisp of dense hatred surged in his eyes. He left with his tail between his legs. However, before he left, he did not notice that a wisp of killing intent had also surged into Chu Xiu's eyes. Wang Qianping was just a nobody. If he had behaved himself, Chu Xiu would not have bothered with him. However, Wang Qianping insisted on stirring up some trouble. In that case, he could not blame Chu Xiu for being ruthless. In particular, Wang Qianping's performance just now was simply forcing Chu Xiu to kill him. Chu Xiu had humiliated him in such a manner just now. If it were any other cultivator, they would have long since exploded in anger and fought Chu Xiu to the death. In the end, Wang Qianping had forcefully endured it and bowed to the extreme. A guy who could be described as a smiling tiger by Cheng Zhouhai, a guy who defeated many competitors in Guannan and became Yin Buotong's disciple, was now acting so cowardly and tolerating? Was it possible? Chu Xiu could guess how much the other party hated him. If he was allowed to return to the Guanzhong torture room alive, who knew what kind of trouble he would cause? In the past few years, there had been many Jianghu constables from the Guanzhong torture hall, who had ventured out to investigate cases, and there had been many who had died accidentally. Right now, Chu Xiu did not want to kill him in public, but whether he could return to the Guanzhong torture hall alive would depend on his luck. When Cheng Zhouhai and Zhong Ping saw Chu Xiu looking at them, a trace of fear appeared in their eyes. There weren't many people in the Guanzhong torture room who disregarded the rules like Chu Xiu. If they hadn't stopped him, who knew if Chu Xiu would have killed Wang Qianping? Chu Xiu smiled at the two and said, "Don't worry, the two of you. This case has been solved. As for Chu Xiaoda, he helped me investigate other things. He will be back in a few days." Cheng Zhouhai and Zhong Ping were stunned. Solved? What did that mean? But before they had time to ponder, a dragon rider Imperial Guard knocked on the door and said in a deep voice, "Official Chu, General Fang asked me to bring you a message. Prince Anil, Jiang Wenyuan, colluded with demons and killed an important minister of Eastern Qi, Qiu Zhenxing, the owner of the Pegasus farm. His Majesty has sent Zhang Rang, the major domo of the front department, one of the 3 departments of the Imperial Palace. My breaking battalion will cooperate. Official Chu and other warriors from the Guanzhong torture room can also participate. After the case is over, everyone will be rewarded. The one who takes Jiang Wenyuan's head will be rewarded handsomely." With that, the dragon rider Imperial Guard took his leave. Chu Xiu nodded in understanding. The reaction of the Eastern Qi royal family was just as he had guessed. Jiang Wenyuan was doomed this time. Although the real cause of this matter was the conflict between the crown prince and the second prince, Lu Haochang couldn't punish his own son. So Jiang Wenyuan had to die. Since he had to die, he naturally had to give a reason. So the Eastern Qi imperial court casually gave Jiang Wenyuan a reason of colluding with demons. Otherwise, how could they explain why Jiang Wenyuan had to kill Qiu Zhenxing, who had no grudges with him and had nothing to do with him? Now in Jianghu, the demons had become professional scapegoats. Once there was something they couldn't explain, they would directly put the blame on the demons. In any case, in the eyes of most people, the demonic path had always been incomparably crazy and illogical. It was very normal for them to do such things. Cheng Zhouhai and Zhong Ping looked at each other, their eyes full of confusion. Cheng Zhouhai was puzzled. Brother Chu, what's going on? We haven't had time to investigate the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion. How could Jiang Wenyuan be convicted? Where's the evidence? Chu Xiu said lightly. If the Emperor of Eastern Qi wants to kill someone, does he need evidence? This time, we were invited by Eastern Qi. As long as Eastern Qi is satisfied and thinks that the case has been closed, do we still need evidence? Pack up and get ready to take action. Let Wang Qianping, that good-for-nothing, follow us. Destroying Prince Annal's mansion is a good job. After so many years, Prince Annal's bloodline has accumulated a lot of good things. How much you can get will depend on your ability. In a luxuriously decorated manor outside the Ji State Prefecture, Jiang Wenyuan rubbed his head. He always felt a sense of crisis lingering in his heart. It was as if he had neglected something, but he couldn't remember it no matter how hard he tried. Jiang Wenyuan pushed the door open and walked out. He happened to see Mr. Liu. Jiang Wenyuan seemed to remember something. He asked, "What on earth has your phaseless demon sect been doing recently? Why did so many people leave?" Mr. Liu chuckled. "It's nothing. Lord Demon Envoy has some instructions. It seems that we have to carry out other tasks. That's why some people were taken away." Hearing that, Jiang Wenyuan snorted coldly. "Don't forget that your phaseless demon sect is cooperating with me now. Every month, I give you guys a lot of cultivation resources, but in the end, you guys go against me on the surface. Do you really think I'm a fool?" Mr. Liu smiled. "Don't worry, Your Highness. There won't be a next time." Jiang Wenyuan snorted. "Good that you know." At this moment, a sudden battle cry came from outside the manor. This caused Jiang Wenyuan's expression to change. "Who's so bold to cause trouble in my Prince Annal's mansion? Do you want your family to be executed?" Jiang Wenyuan said angrily. At this moment, the door of the inner residence was blasted open. Over 100 martial artists rushed in. The one leading them was a tall middle-aged eunuch wearing a dark green brocade robe. At this moment, the eunuch was surrounded by a light green gang energy. Wherever he passed, a cold and gloomy aura wafted in. Some of the exotic flowers and plants in the Prince Annal's gang energy immediately began to wither when they came into contact with the gang energy on his body. It looked very evil. Jiang Wenyuan looked at the eunuch and said with a slightly trembling voice, "Chief Handprint Master of the Front Palace Division, Poisonous Dragon Hand Zhang Rang." An expert of the Imperial Palace, the true confidant of the Eastern Qi Emperor Liu Haochang. Jiang Wenyuan naturally recognized Zhang Rang. At this moment around Zhang Rang was Wang Jin, who he scolded a few days ago and ran away. She was looking at him with a cold smile. There was also Chu Xiu, who he had wanted to kill but failed to do so. He was looking at him expressionlessly with the people from the Guanzhong torture room. Among them were the Dragon Riders Imperial Guards who belonged to the Second Prince's Vanguard Battalion. Seeing all these people gathered here, Jiang Wenyuan didn't even dare to think about what had happened. Zhang Rang chuckled and said, "Your Highness, I'm very honored that you still recognize me. Since that's the case, let me see you off today. It's also my honor to be able to end the last Prince Annal in the history of Eastern Qi." Jiang Wenyuan's eyes widened and he shouted, "Zhang Rang, what do you mean?" In the past, Emperor Taizu himself said that he would ensure the Jiang clan's eternal happiness. What do you mean by this? "I want to see His Majesty. I want to see His Majesty." Zhang Rang said calmly, "Prince Annal, stop struggling. His Majesty is busy every day and has no time to see you. I can't be bothered to talk about your crimes. You asked for it, so you can't blame anyone else." Emperor Taizu did say that he would ensure the Jiang clan's eternal happiness. But don't forget, the one sitting on the throne now is not Emperor Taizu. Prince Anil, go on your way. I'll kill you and receive my reward. Next year, on your Memorial Day, I'll have someone burn Joss paper for you. Chu Xiu looked on coldly from the side. He had long felt that Jiang Wenyuan was courting death, but the speed at which he did so was faster than he imagined. Moreover, this time, Jiang Wenyuan could be said to have sent himself to his grave. If he hadn't gone to kill Chu Xiu wouldn't have been so obsessed with him. In the end, Jiang Wenyuan had sent Mr. Liu to kill Chu Xiu. Not only had he failed to kill Chu Xiu, but now he had a mole. This time, if Chu Xiu hadn't handed over the results to the second prince, and allowed the second prince to add oil to the fire, the matter would have been exposed. Jiang Wenyuan might have been reprimanded and punished, but he wouldn't have been ordered to be killed by the emperor so quickly. At this time, Jiang Wenyuan's entire body was cold. This was a scene he had never imagined. His identity as a death exemption medallion would have a day like this. Only now did Jiang Wenyuan realize that everything he had was actually given to him by the Liu royal family, whom he regarded as his enemy. The so-called death exemption medallion was only because the emperor didn't want to kill him. If the emperor really wanted to kill him, even 10,000 death exemption medallions wouldn't be enough. Zhang Rang took a step forward, and dark green astral energy erupted from his body. As his claw descended, astral energy shot towards Jiang Wenyuan like a soaring dragon. In the blink of an eye, the area within 1,000 feet radius was enveloped by this highly toxic astral energy. All things fell silent, and all flowers withered. Martial artists who condensed the true martial core and communicated with the power of heaven and earth were known as martial Dao grandmasters. They had the strength to destroy a city and fight an army of 10,000 by themselves. Although Zhang Rang was a eunuch, he was also a genuine martial Dao grandmaster. At this time, his attack had the power to change the color of heaven and earth. Prince Anil, I'm here to send you on your way. At this moment, a sword chime sounded in the Prince Anil residence. A long sword shining with a golden glow pierced through the air, slashing towards Zhang Rang's poisonous dragon claw. The pure yang sword aura pierced through the air, and instantly melted the poisonous mist. An old man in a white Taoist robe walked out of the inner residence. The long sword flew back into his hand, and disappeared into his loose Taoist robe. The old man said in a deep voice, "Where there's life, there's hope. Your Highness, take your people and leave first." This old man has received great kindness from the old prince in the past, and has been worshipped by your Jiang clan for decades. Now it's time to return the favor. Chapter 289. Jiang Wenyuan had the ambition to rebel, so he naturally had to have some family background and strength. Otherwise, he would really be an arrogant idiot. Therefore, whether it was Chu Xiu or the others, they were not surprised by the sudden appearance of a martial Dao master, who could match Zhang Rang. Zhang Rang frowned and pondered for a moment before saying, "Chunyang Dao sect's abandoned disciple. 9 Palace Scorching Sun Do Hanwei? It was said that you killed a fellow disciple by mistake, and were expelled from the Chunyang Dao sect. You were hunted down to the point where no one knew if you were dead or alive. I didn't expect you to still be alive, and have even become a martial Dao master. Since you've become a martial Dao master, even the Chunyang Dao sect can't hunt you down like before. Why are you courting death?" As one of the 3 major Taoist sects, the Chunyang Dao sect was the first to know about any changes in it. Although Do Hanwei's reputation in the pure Yang Dao sect wasn't that great in the past, he was still a well-known figure. Who would have thought that he would suddenly reveal the matter of killing a fellow sect member without permission? Since then, he had been hunted down by the pure Yang Dao sect, and was also known by the people of the Jianghu. Back then, he was already in the unity of heaven and man state. Now that decades had passed, everyone thought he was long dead. Who would have thought that Do Hanwei had been hiding in Prince Anil's residence, and had even stepped into the martial Dao master realm? Do Hanwei flung his Taoist robe and said in a deep voice, "Killed a fellow disciple by mistake? You're wrong about one thing. It wasn't a manslaughter. I was prepared to kill. Some people really deserve to be killed. Even if I had to betray the sect for it, I wouldn't hesitate. I don't want to talk about these old things anymore. If it wasn't for the previous Prince Anil who took the risk to take me in, I'm afraid I would have become a skeleton in a grave by now. I wouldn't have the cultivation base of a martial Dao master now. I must repay this kindness. Whether it's death or survival, we'll only know after a battle. As his voice fell, Do Hanwei flicked his long sleeves, and from his loose robes, a series of long swords shining with pure yang astral energy shot out one after another. There were a total of 9 swords, each shining with dazzling pure yang astral energy, as they slashed towards Zhang Rang. Behind Do Hanwei, Jiang Wenyuan glared angrily, his eyes filled with unwillingness. It was not easy for the Jiang clan to recruit such an expert and nurture him to become a Wu Dao grandmaster. But now he was exposed. Facing the notorious grand supervisor of the front hall department, poisonous dragon hand Zhang Rang, even Jiang Wenyuan himself had no confidence in Do Hanwei. Uncle Qi, who was standing behind Jiang Wenyuan, hurriedly pulled Jiang Wenyuan and said, "Your Highness, let's go. We don't know how long Senior Do Hanwei can last. If we don't leave now, it will be too late." Jiang Wenyuan gritted his teeth and said, "Let's go." With that, Jiang Wenyuan left the prince's mansion under the escort of his henchmen. At this time, Do Hanwei had already begun to fight fiercely with Zhang Rang. Do Hanwei was born in Chunyang Dao sect, one of the 3 major Taoist sects in the world. His own strength was extremely profound. Chunyang Dao sect's pure yang astral energy was well known in the world. It was the existence of extreme yang among all astral energies. It had the magical power to destroy evil, and was just able to restrain Zhang Rang's toxic astral energy. The martial arts technique that Do Hanwei cultivated was also very strange. He spent more than 10 years sacrificial refining 9 pure yang swords. When facing the enemy, he used pure yang astral energy to control them. He could even form the 9 palace scorching sun sword array with his own strength. Its power was very extraordinary. So even if Do Hanwei broke through to the real pellet state later than Zhang Rang, his combat experience was not as much as Zhang Rang. But right now, the two of them were evenly matched. While fighting with Do Hanwei, Zhang Rang shouted, "Everyone attack! Don't let Jiang Wenyuan escape." As soon as his voice fell, Zhang Rang's robe fluttered, and his astral energy fluttered. With a claw, a colorful poisonous mist burst out. Like a domain, it shrouded Do Hanwei in it. Within the range, even the heaven and earth's aura was corroded. Zhang Rang was also a little anxious. He didn't expect Do Hanwei's technique to restrain him so much that he couldn't take him down for a while. Amidst the colorful poisonous mist that was so colorful that it was impossible to see what was going on inside, a bright golden light appeared. Do Hanwei spat out a mouthful of blood, which was attached to his 9 pure yang swords. His blood was burning, and the 9 pure yang swords surrounded him, making him look like a blazing sun. "Defend." With a shout, the 9 pure yang swords slashed out one after another, each more powerful than the other. The 9 swords slashed out together, directly tearing the poisonous mist domain apart. Suppress. In the blink of an eye, the 9 pure yang swords were linked together, condensing into a sword formation that attacked Zhang Rang, instantly suppressing him. The battle between the 2 martial Dao grandmasters fascinated the crowd below. After all, for people of their level, watching experts fight could bring them a lot of benefits. But benefits aside, the mission still had to be completed. After Jiang Wenyuan escaped, everyone immediately began to chase after him. They were determined to bring back Jiang Wenyuan's head. However, Prince Enel residents had accumulated a lot of power over the years. Among them, there were several experts at the unity of heaven and man realm. Even though Wang Jin and Fang Zhenqi had the strength of the unity of heaven and man realm, and there were also many warriors at the unity of heaven and man realm among the front hall division that Zhang Rang brought with him, they were still stopped by the other party. These hangers-ons of the Prince of Enlu residence were all recruited by Jiang Wenyuan through his courteous actions over the years. They did not disappoint the offerings Jiang Wenyuan had given them. Even though they knew that the Prince of Enlu residence was about to fall apart, they still fought with all their might. Although there were some who escaped halfway, they were still the minority. At this time, Chu Xiu was also chasing after Jiang Wenyuan with the people from Guanzhong torture room, killing the enemies who came to stop them one by one. Cheng Zhouhai, Zhongping, and Wang Qianping followed behind Chu Xiu. They had the least people from Guanzhong torture room, so they were just there to watch the show. However, killing one person was a credit. When the time came, they could go to Eastern Qi to receive a reward. No matter what, it would be more than their salary from Guanzhong torture room. However, at this time, Wang Qianping looked at Chu Xiu with deep malice and resentment. He would never forget the humiliation that Chu Xiu brought to him yesterday. At this time, Wang Qianping was even thinking about whether he should take the opportunity to sneak an attack on Chu Xiu. However, this idea only went through his mind once before it was killed. Sneak an attack on Chu Xiu now was simply courting death. He had already experienced Chu Xiu's strength yesterday. Chu Xiu was an existence that could completely crush him. In the hands of Chu Xiu, he could not even block a single move. Moreover, even if the sneak attack was successful, Cheng Zhouhai and Zhong Ping were here. If they saw him, unless he could kill them, he would not be able to return to Guanzhong torture room in this life. Otherwise, he would be chased to death by people from Guanzhong torture room. Chu Xiu's position in Guanzhong torture room was not the same as his. If he had been killed by Chu Xiu yesterday, then Guanzhong torture room would only punish Chu Xiu severely. However, if he dared to sneak an attack on Chu Xiu and cause his death, it would become an unforgivable felony. After all, he was just an ordinary inspector, while Chu Xiu was the most outstanding young man in Guanzhong torture room. Even if Guanzhong torture room claimed to be fair and impartial, there was still a great difference between the status of each martial artist. Just as Wang Qianping's imagination ran wild, he saw more than 10 diabolism martial artists with monstrous devil chi suddenly rushing out, which immediately shocked everyone present. Previously, they said that Jiang Wenyuan colluded with diabolism and so on. In fact, it was just an excuse made up by Zhang Rang. After all, the internal strife of the royal family was not a good thing to say. In the end, who would have thought that Jiang Wenyuan really colluded with diabolism? This was not an ordinary kind of courage. However, these diabolism martial artists did not come to stop Chu Xiu and the others. Instead, they wanted to rush out. Among them, the direction they chose was in the direction where Chu Xiu and the others were. A strange look appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes. He suddenly shouted, "Retreat!" As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu's figure immediately retreated to the surroundings. Cheng Zhouhai and the others were stunned for a moment, then immediately retreated to the sides. These diabolism martial artists were very strong. The weakest was at the physical invulnerability realm, and the leader was even at the unity of heaven and man realm. If they went head-on against them, they would simply be courting death. It was reasonable for Chu Xiu to ask them to retreat for the time being. And these diabolism martial artists seemed to really want to break out of the encirclement. After Chu Xiu retreated, they directly rushed past them. However, when the leader of the unity of heaven and man realm martial artists passed by Wang Qianping, whose speed was slower than Chu Xiu's, he suddenly slammed his palm down. A giant devil chi hand that was more than 10 feet in size suddenly smashed down, directly slapping the defenseless Wang Qianping away. In an instant, his internal organs were smashed, and he immediately lost all signs of life. Even at death's door, Wang Qianping could not understand why this diabolism martial artist did not attack when he passed by Chu Xiu, nor did he attack when he passed by Cheng Zhouhai and Zhong Ping. However, when he passed by Wang Qianping, he suddenly slapped him to death, as if he was casually slapping a fly that was blocking the road. After killing Wang Qianping with one palm, the leading diabolism martial artist did not even stop, nor did he look at Chu Xiu and the others. Instead, he directly fled into the distance, as if his only purpose was to escape. Cheng Zhouhai and Zhong Ping were dumbfounded. They subconsciously looked at Chu Xiu with a trace of suspicion. They could not be blamed for such actions. Yesterday, Wang Qianping was prepared to secretly stab Chu Xiu with a knife, but was taught a lesson by Chu Xiu. In the end, he died here inexplicably today. Anyone would subconsciously look at Chu Xiu with suspicion. Chu Xiu shrugged and said, "Why are you looking at me like that? Just now, I told you to retreat." In the end, I don't know what that idiot was thinking, but he was a little slow. He blocked someone's path, and was killed with one palm. Who can you blame? Life and death are decreed by fate. This guy has no other choice but to blame his own bad luck. Chapter 290. Chu Xiu's words made Cheng Zhouhai and Zhong Ping speechless. Unlucky? Perhaps this was the only explanation, even though it sounded perfunctory. However, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, everyone saw how Wang Qianping died. Cheng Zhouhai and Zhong Ping weren't the kind of people who liked to meddle in other people's business. They also hated Wang Qianping, so no one said anything. Instead, they continued to kill the people from Prince Annal's residence. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "Don't gather together. Everyone split up. Pick the weaker ones. We're outsiders, and we're only here to get our rewards. The escape of Prince Annal's residence has nothing to do with us." Cheng Zhouhai and Zhong Ping nodded. Even if Chu Xiu didn't say so, they would still do so. If a few experts suddenly appeared and killed them with a slap, then that would be really unlucky. After the three of them split up, Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. As if he already had a target in mind, he chased in one direction. The people who attacked just now were from Phaseless Demon Sect. However, that Unity of Heaven and Man Realm martial artist wasn't Mr. Liu, but another Unity of Heaven and Man Realm expert from Phaseless Demon Sect. That Wang Qianping was courting death, so Chu Xiu naturally wouldn't spare him. Although Wang Qianping's strength was low and Chu Xiu didn't really care about him, he didn't want to bring trouble back to the Guanzhong torture room. So he decided to settle it here. He was just a physical invulnerability realm martial artist. The people from Phaseless Demon Sect didn't mind doing Chu Xiu a favor and killed him with a slap. At this moment, Jiang Wenyuan had already escaped with Uncle Qi and another Unity of Heaven and Man realm martial artist. The rest of the hangers-on and priests were behind them, blocking the pursuers. For the time being, they shouldn't be able to catch up. Looking at Uncle Qi and the middle-aged man with a long sword on his back, Jiang Wenyuan couldn't help but feel sad. He couldn't help but sigh. The middle-aged man with the long sword on his back said in a deep voice, "Your Highness doesn't need to be like this. Didn't you already prepare quite a bit of assets on the Northern Yan and West Chu side? If we can't stay in Eastern Qi, we can go to Northern Yan or West Chu." Uncle Qi also said, "That's right. The Liu imperial family is treacherous. After this, they will definitely be reviled by the world. A crafty rabbit has 3 burrows." Actually, King Enli's bloodline had already sent people to buy property in the Northern Yan and Western Chu lands since Jiang Wenyuan's ancestors, as well as large amounts of resources. They were afraid that the Liu family would suddenly turn against them, so they had a way out. However, King Enli's bloodline had been safe and sound all these years, and Jiang Wenyuan had never thought that he would have to use it one day. Jiang Wenyuan revealed a crying and smiling expression. "Gone, everything is gone. My roots are in Eastern Qi. Even if I go to Northern Yan or West Chu, I won't have a chance to make a comeback." Only now did Jiang Wenyuan realize that everything he had was given to him by the Liu imperial family. Eastern Qi recognized him as the King of Ease. He was the true king of Eastern Qi with a different surname. He could peacefully develop his power and recruit so many heroes of the Jianghu. Without this identity, he was not even worth a fart. How could he make a comeback? At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded. "Since your Highness doesn't want to go to West Chu or Northern Yan, why don't you stay in Eastern Qi?" Uncle Qi and the middle-aged warrior with a long sword on his back immediately became vigilant as they looked in the direction of the voice. They saw Mr. Liu's figure walk out from the darkness. Seeing that it was him, Uncle Qi and the martial artist let out a sigh of relief. They were naturally very familiar with Mr. Liu. The Phaseless Demon Sect had been working with King Enli's palace for a long time, and Mr. Liu had always been the one to contact them. However, Jiang Wenyuan looked at Mr. Liu and shouted, "Why did your Phaseless Demon Sect people run away just now? You people from the demonic path are really unreliable." Jiang Wenyuan saw that the Phaseless Demon Sect people didn't participate in the fight against the pursuers. Instead, they all ran away. Uncle Qi pulled Jiang Wenyuan lightly, indicating for him to calm down. Now that King Enli's palace had completely fallen apart, their cooperation with the Phaseless Demon Sect naturally couldn't continue. It was best not to offend them at this time. They might even need to borrow the power of the Phaseless Demon Sect to escape. Just as Uncle Qi was about to say something, Mr. Liu suddenly said, "Chu, come out. My phaseless demon sect won't be able to take this credit, so I'll give it to you. Chu Xiu's figure also walked out from another direction. He cupped his hands towards Mr. Lu and said with a smile, "Thank you, Senior." Seeing Chu Xiu appear, Jiang Wenyuan and the others instantly widened their eyes. They didn't know what was going on. Chu Xiu asked, "Senior, did you move all the things from King and Li's palace?" Mr. Lu smiled and said, "You informed me in time. After the people from the front hall called, I already let the last batch of phaseless demon sect disciples use the secret space box to move all the things. TSK, all these years, King and Li's palace has really accumulated a lot of wealth. It must have been hard for the Lu family to tolerate you for so long." Chu Xiu, who was pretending to be a demonic sect disciple, had a great deal of business with the phaseless demon sect. When the people from the front hall were about to make their move, he sent a message to Mr. Lu, telling them to prepare and take advantage of the situation. In the end, King and Li's palace would definitely be raided, and he wouldn't be able to get anything. Mr. Lu also returned the favor by secretly following Jiang Wenyuan and telling him Jiang Wenyuan's location to Chu Xiu. Although the Eastern Qi Emperor had already said that Jiang Wenyuan's head could be exchanged for a reward, he was still a demonic cultivator, and he was from the notorious phaseless demon sect. If Mr. Lu took Jiang Wenyuan's head to ask for a reward, he would probably lose his own head to the Eastern Qi Emperor. Therefore, it was better to give it to Chu Xiu. After listening to the conversation between the two, Jiang Wenyuan's face was already red from the stimulation, as if blood was about to drip out. He pointed at Mr. Lu and shouted, "Bastard! You actually betrayed me." Uncle Qi and the martial artist with the sword on his back were also shocked. It was one thing for King and Li's palace to collude with the phaseless demon sect. After all, with Jiang Wenyuan's status, it was normal for him to do such a thing. However, Chu Xiu was the most outstanding martial artist of the younger generation in the Guanzhong torture room, and he actually did something like colluding with the demonic cultivators. If news of this got out, Chu Xiu would definitely be doomed. Mr. Lu said calmly, "Your Highness, you're wrong. My phaseless demon sect has never been your subordinate, so how could I betray you? Seeing that we've worked together before, I've personally come to see you off. This is already very kind of me." Jiang Wenyuan glared at Chu Xiu and Mr. Lu, looking like he wanted to swallow them alive. At this moment, he suddenly realized why he had failed when he asked Mr. Lu to kill Chu Xiu. The two of them had actually colluded long ago. Chu Xiu took a step forward and said calmly, "Prince and Lu, originally, you and I had minded our own business. Even if the progress of the case was stuck in your dragon gathering pavilion, it would still depend on the attitude of the Eastern Qi Imperial Court. I wouldn't have forcefully attacked you, but you insisted on killing me. You've courted your own death, so you can't blame anyone else. Now that the Eastern Qi Emperor wants your head, even if you escape to the northern Yen West Chu, you'll still face endless pursuit. So why don't you take advantage of me now? I'll also give you a quick death. Isn't that good?" The middle-aged martial artist with a sword on his back took a step forward and said in a deep voice, "Uncle Qi, take His Highness away first. I'll stop them here." Mr. Lu laughed strangely and said, "Sorrowful autumn swordsman Han Dongel, you've been a guest under Jiang Wenyuan for almost 10 years, right? Back then, you made a grudge against the Nansong Xiahou clan because of a woman, and it was Jiang Wenyuan who helped you settle it. But in fact, Jiang Wenyuan only said one sentence. For this sentence, you've been a guest under Jiang Wenyuan for 10 years, and you've been loyal to him. Isn't that enough? Why are you risking your life? Don't you know my strength?" Han Dongel pulled out the long sword he'd always carried on his back. It was a magnificent long sword with strange patterns, and it looked unusually dazzling. The kindness of a meal must be repaid, and the grievances of a small grudge must be repaid. Since I've received His Highness' kindness in the past, now I have to repay it. The kindness of a meal is already like this, let alone His Highness helping me block the Nansong Xiahou clan. Although it's just one sentence, it's more valuable than my life. Mr. Lu, I've seen you fight. Your strength is probably only a step away from the martial arts Grandmaster realm. I'm far from being your match. But today, as long as I can still pick up my sword, You can't touch His Highness." Seeing Han Dongul like this, Mr. Lu shook his head and said, "Loyalty is always reserved for dogs. A martial artist from a humble background like you is more loyal than those disciples from large sections. Now I know why Jiang Wenyuan likes to recruit martial artists from humble backgrounds like you, even at any cost. You people are really stupid to the point of being cute. I'm a bit reluctant to kill you. I rarely give people a chance. Now, I'm giving you a chance. Are you going to return it or not?" Han Dongul shook his head and said, "Everyone has their own persistence in their hearts. Just like the Kunlun devil cult has been destroyed for so many years, but your phaseless demon sect still doesn't give up. Now I won't back down either." As his voice fell, Han Dongul actually directly slashed at Mr. Lu with his sword. The sword momentum was as swift as the wind, incomparably magnificent and dazzling. "What a pity, you're so stubborn." Mr. Lu sighed and slammed his palm down. Boundless demonic chi condensed into a terrifying giant hand that attacked Han Dongul's sword momentum. Yama Demon Claw, tearing the heavens and splitting the earth. Almost in an instant, Han Dongul's sword momentum was shattered by Mr. Lu's claw. The scene was completely crushed. However, Han Dongul didn't seem to be afraid of death at all. Seeing that he was no match for Mr. Lu, he actually chose to burn his essence blood to delay Mr. Lu. Jiang Wenyuan's eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Humans weren't plants. Previously, he recruited these hanger-ons and worshippers with utilitarian intentions. In fact, he just wanted to make use of them. However, these people had already accompanied him for more than 10 years or even decades. In the end, they were all risking their lives to protect him. How could Jiang Wenyuan not feel touched? However, now wasn't the time to feel touched. Uncle Chi directly pulled Jiang Wenyuan up and shouted, "Prince, leave quickly." As he spoke, Uncle Chi directly exploded with his fastest speed. He didn't care about any seniority and forcibly carried Jiang Wenyuan on his back, wanting to escape. However, not long after he ran, Chu Xiu's voice rang out behind him. "Run? You can't run away. Why don't you lend me your head to claim the reward? Next year, I can still burn some paper money for you so that you can continue to live comfortably in the underworld. Isn't that good?" Chapter 291. Chu Xiu colluded with various parties and finally succeeded in getting rid of Jiang Wenyuan with the help of the Eastern Qi royal family. How could he let the other party off so easily? However, Chu Xiu did not expect the Jiang clan to have accumulated such a strong foundation over the years. This foundation was not in terms of cultivation resources, but in terms of people. The Jiang who was evil, and profit was the top priority. Even some of the famous righteous sects spoke of benevolence and righteousness, but in reality, they tossed morality aside. However, the world was so big, and there were some people who truly valued loyalty, filial piety, benevolence and righteousness. For example, Do Hanwei and now Han Dongul were both like this. However, it was a pity that such people were too few. Moreover, with Jiang Wenyuan's current situation, it was useless no matter how many of such people there were. From today onwards, the King of Peace and Happiness's bloodline was destined to go to the underworld. Uncle Chi looked at Chu Xiu behind him in shock. Previously in the Dragon Gatherer Pavilion, he had fought with Chu Xiu. At that time, he knew that Chu Xiu was very strong, but he did not expect Chu Xiu to have such terrifying speed. The fast and slow 9 words formula's inner binding seal was the pinnacle of speed. At least in a short distance, other than consuming too much internal energy and not being able to use it for a long time, there was almost no weakness. In a few breaths' time, Chu Xiu had already caught up with Uncle Chi. He directly slashed at Uncle Chi, and the blood-refined god's aura was mixed with surging demonic energy. Uncle Chi still carried Jiang Wenyuan on his back. He could not retreat, nor did he dare to retreat. He could only explode all the earth energy in his body to block this slash. With a loud bang, Uncle Chi's body did not move, but a trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Putting down Jiang Wenyuan, Uncle Chi turned to Jiang Wenyuan and said in a low voice, "If not for your highness saving my life in the past, I'm afraid this old man would have long become a skeleton in a grave." Now this old man can only block this one last time for your highness. If you escape to West Chu or Northern Yen, you will have a chance to live. Your highness, take care." As soon as he finished speaking, Uncle Chi formed a seal with one hand. In an instant, his aura skyrocketed from the physical invulnerability realm all the way to the 3 flowers at one's prominence, 5 Chis collecting in mind, and finally to the oneness of heaven and man. This was Uncle Chi's strength when he was at his peak. If he had not encountered a problem when he was trying to break through to Martial Dao Grandmaster, his current strength would not be inferior to Do Hanwei. However, at that moment, Uncle Chi's complexion was frighteningly pale. There were even streams of essential energy surging through his meridians. It was extremely evil. In the past, Uncle Chi encountered a problem when he was trying to break through to the Martial Dao Grandmaster realm. His physical body was actually already rotten beyond recognition. Even with the help of the Jianghu's miracle doctor, phone booping, he had improved a little, but he could only maintain the cultivation of the physical invulnerability realm. Now he had forcefully broken through the seal and unleashed the strength of the oneness of heaven and man realm. In reality, he was committing suicide. Even if Chu Xiu retreated now, it would not take long before Uncle Chi's meridians would explode from overexertion. After bursting forth with his final moment of brilliance, Uncle Chi took a step forward and attacked Chu Xiu. The ground beneath his feet was actually left with a crater that was dozens of feet wide. Uncle Chi could not hold on for much longer, so he wanted to use the last of his strength to fight Chu Xiu to death. Even if he had to injure him so severely that he could not attack Jiang Wenyuan again, it was still good enough. Jiang Wenyuan, who was behind, gritted his teeth as he watched all this. However, in the end he still chose to turn around and escape. Among the guest officials under his command, Uncle Chi was his true confidant. He was saved by Jiang Wenyuan when he was young, and he was both a master and a friend to Jiang Wenyuan. He could be said to be loyal. However, it was precisely because of this that Jiang Wenyuan chose to escape immediately. He did not want to let Uncle Chi down. At this moment, Chu Xiu, who was facing Uncle Chi, had a serious look in his eyes. Uncle Chi, who had unleashed his last trump card, was so powerful that he was practically no different from the oneness of heaven and man realm experts like Mr. Liu or the Heavenly Sin branch leader. At most, his physical strength was slightly weaker. However, Uncle Chi's punch seemed to contain a hint of the power of heaven and earth. His Gang Chi merged with the heaven and earth, passively carrying a trace of power that belonged to heaven and earth. When the punch landed, it brought with it the roar of a dragon and a tiger, roaring through the heavens and earth. Chu Xiu held his sword with both hands. In an instant, his blade was completely soaked in demonic aura. The Avicii Devil's Blade, the gates of hell opened. Facing Uncle Chi of this level, Chu Xiu used the second blade of his Avicii 3 blades to take the attack head-on. The powerful Gang Chi fist collided with Chu Xiu's demonic aura blade, and an earth-shattering sound erupted. A clanging sound rang out, and the blood-colored demonic aura blade shattered. Chu Xiu's figure retreated step by step. When his feet landed on the ground, a hole several feet wide was immediately blasted open. After retreating over 10 steps, Chu Xiu finally managed to stop. However, his hands were already numb, and even the heavenly demon dance in his hands was trembling. This was a complete suppression of strength. No matter how strong Chu Xiu's martial arts techniques were, he would not be able to withstand it. Of course, the current Chu Xiu had improved very obviously. Previously, Chu Xiu had used De Gein to take a blow from the Heavenly Sin branch leader head-on. However, that blow had already exhausted all of Chu Xiu's strength. Now he still had the strength to fight. Uncle Chi did not stop at all. His hands formed a fist seal again, and he smashed it towards Chu Xiu like he was moving mountains and seas. When his fist landed just now, although Chu Xiu had been sent flying more than 10 steps, his entire right arm was dripping with blood. It was obvious that it was not far from being completely crippled. There was not much time left for Uncle Chi. When this fist seal landed, its power was several times stronger than Chu Xiu's great Vajrawheel seal. Everywhere it passed, endless sonic booms rang out. Even the space around Chu Xiu had been sealed, so he had nowhere to hide or evade. The pressure of this seal continued to attack. Chu Xiu also landed a fist seal. The surrounding Gang Qi seemed to start to stagnate as it enveloped Uncle Qi. Wisdom fist seal, main space. Heaven and earth were useless. Although this seal technique consumed a shocking amount of energy, it could be used both offensively and defensively. Its power was extraordinary. However, under Uncle Qi's desperate attack, the opponent's crushing power was too shocking. The space sealed by the Wisdom Fist seal only managed to stop Uncle Qi for a few breaths of time before it was completely destroyed. At the crucial moment, Chu Xiu's hand formed the Duguin seal. All the Gang Qi in his body condensed into one. He was as immovable as a mountain and impregnable. 2 consecutive seals blasted out, but they still could not block Uncle Qi's incomparably powerful fist seal. The Gang Qi defense that Duguin had set up was directly shattered. Both of Chu Xiu's feet were smashed into the ground. His body flew backwards, leaving 2 deep marks on the ground. A stream of blood flowed out of Chu Xiu's mouth. His internal organs felt waves of pain. However, the corners of his mouth curled up to reveal a smile. This was because Uncle Qi's arms, which were dripping with blood, were hanging by his side. His body, which had already completely aged and decayed, could not support such a powerful force. Now he was completely crippled. Uncle Qi sighed helplessly. He had already tried his best. However, Chu Xiu's strength was beyond his imagination. The 2 attacks that he had unleashed with all his cultivation had actually been blocked by Chu Xiu. The only price he had paid was a slight shock to his internal organs. In this way, even if he wanted to kill Chu Xiu at his peak, he might not be able to do it. However, he did not ask for too much. If he could block Chu Xiu for a moment, Jiang Wenyuan would have an additional chance of survival. His arms were crippled, but he still had his legs. At this moment, all the strength in Uncle Qi's body was channeled into his legs. His feet moved like a qilin shaking the ground. A large area of the ground beneath his feet started to crack. Uncle Qi's body shot out like a cannonball. He descended from the sky and kicked at Chu Xiu. Wherever he passed, sonic booms could be heard. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. This old guy's all-out attack was really extraordinary. However, it was a pity that Uncle Qi was already an arrow at the end of its flight. The power of this kick was not enough. Since ancient times, there had been no conclusion on whether a martial artist should train his body or train his qi. However, everyone in the world knew that only a powerful body could contain more true qi, and only a powerful body could withstand all kinds of powerful forces. Therefore, the basics of martial arts must be trained in the body, followed by qi. Right now, Uncle Qi's strength was extremely incompatible with the strength of his body. The strength of the unity of heaven and man realm coupled with his old body that was only at the physical invulnerability realm couldn't allow his strength to reach its peak. Facing Uncle Qi's kick, Chu Xiu did not retreat. Instead, he advanced. He formed a fist seal and faced the sky. At this moment, the fist seal in Chu Xiu's hand released an endless dazzling light. It was as dazzling as the blazing sun, incomparably resplendent. Fulfill the wishes of all, release the supreme light. Forwarding formula, perfect Aquarius seal. This was the strongest seal that Chu Xiu had mastered so far in the fast and slow 9 words formulas. Forcefully using it would even cause a slight backlash of true qi. Previously at the God Weapon Conference, Chu Xiu had used this technique to kill Tong Kaitai. And now, facing Uncle Qi, under Chu Xiu's perfect Aquarius seal, endless Gang Qi and the brilliance of the sun were released. The violent explosion of true qi tore the ground in a radius of over 10 feet. Even Jiang Wenyuan, who had escaped several miles away, could see the dazzling light in the night sky. In the midst of the endless explosion of Gang Qi, Chu Xiu's figure did not move. When the smoke and dust dispersed, Chu Xiu's face was slightly pale. However, Uncle Qi's figure was already nowhere to be seen. There was only scattered blood mist floating in the air. Under the attack just now, the powerful force produced had directly torn Uncle Qi's body apart, turning him into a cloud of blood mist. This was the consequence of having a weak body. Under the collision of such a level of power, not even a complete corpse could be preserved. Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Really, why did you have to do this?" With Uncle Qi's strength, as long as he didn't use power that exceeded the physical invulnerability realm, It would not be a problem for him to live for another few decades. He might even survive Jiang Wenyuan's death. In the end, regardless of whether it was Do Hanwei, Han Dongul, or now Uncle Qi, they all sacrificed themselves for one person. This kind of feeling was something that Chu Xiu could understand. However, one's life was given by one's own mother and father. Other than oneself, no one else could take it away. Although Uncle Qi and the others were worthy of respect, Chu Xiu would never acknowledge such a thing in this lifetime. Chapter 292. In the wilderness, Jiang Wenyuan ran with all his strength. He felt that his spiritual qi was being consumed. He didn't know how long it had been since he last felt this way. After living like a prince for decades, Jiang Wenyuan had the strength of the innate realm. However, it was just a realm. It could strengthen his body and allow him to live longer, but it didn't mean that he had combat power. Jiang Wenyuan had already seen the dazzling light behind him. He couldn't help but feel a trace of sadness in his heart. He knew that Uncle Qi probably couldn't stop Chu Xiu. However, compared to the sadness, Jiang Wenyuan's heart was also filled with unwillingness. The Anil residents had accumulated power for so many years, but in the end, they found that everything was no match for a sentence from the Lu family. How sad was this? However, before Jiang Wenyuan could grieve for too long, there was already the sound of wind breaking behind him. Chu Xiu was dressed in black with a demonic saber at his waist. Blood-colored Gang Qi danced around his body, making him look like a god of death. He looked extremely terrifying. If it were any other three-flower realm warrior, Uncle Qi might have been able to block him for long enough for them to escape. However, Jiang Wenyuan's speed was far from enough. Looking at Chu Xiu chasing behind him, Jiang Wenyuan's eyes showed endless fear. When he first met Chu Xiu, he thought of him as a fledgling and wanted to recruit him. Even not long ago, in Jiang Wenyuan's eyes, Chu Xiu was like an ant. He could kill him if he wanted, as long as he did it cleanly. He even dared to kill the owner of the Pegasus Ranch, Xiuzhensheng. What was a mere Chu Xiu to him? However, it was only now that Jiang Wenyuan realized that without the title of Anil Prince and the power he relied on to survive, he was nothing at all. In terms of pure combat power, he was the ant in front of Chu Xiu. Seeing that Chu Xiu was getting closer, the fear in Jiang Wenyuan's eyes turned into unwillingness. He shouted, "Chu Xiu, I know you want benefits. Although you can go to the Eastern Qi Emperor to receive a reward if you kill me, you can get even more if you don't kill me. Northern Yan, Western Chu, I have countless assets and accumulations here. And I also..." However, before Jiang Wenyuan could finish speaking, Chu Xiu's hand moved, and a scarlet-red blade light attacked. In an instant, Jiang Wenyuan's head was separated from his body. There was still a look of dissatisfaction in his eyes, but his head was already in Chu Xiu's hand. Perhaps until his death, Jiang Wenyuan could not believe that Chu Xiu would kill him without even listening to his conditions. Holding Jiang Wenyuan's head, the heavenly demon dance was not stained with any blood at all. The blood flowed along the edge of the saber to the ground, and the saber remained sharp and dazzling. Chu Xiu was not interested in Jiang Wenyuan's conditions, and he did not plan on going to Northern Yan and West Chu to think about these things. It was more convenient to take Jiang Wenyuan's head to receive his reward. What's more, Chu Xiu did not intend to forgive those who wanted to kill him. No one could change his mind. Sometimes having a heart of stone was also a kind of decisiveness. After searching Jiang Wenyuan's body, there was nothing of value. There were only a few special machine keys, which should be used to store some of the treasures and resources in Prince Anil's mansion. It was of no use to Chu Xiu. The entire Prince Anil's mansion had been ransacked by the phaseless demon sect. The rest of the things would definitely be taken away by the front hall department. It would not be Chu Xiu's turn. This time, Jiang Wenyuan escaped in a hurry, so he definitely did not bring the rest of the things with him. Therefore, Chu Xiu did not care about the body and directly left with the head. When Chu Xiu returned with Jiang Wenyuan's head, Han Dongul and Mr. Lu had already disappeared. However, Chu Xiu had already guessed the result. Facing an expert like Mr. Lu who was only one step away from the martial arts grandmaster realm, Han Dongul was no match at all. He should have been killed by now, and even his body had been cleaned up by Mr. Liu. When Chu Xiu returned to Prince Anil's mansion, the battle there had just ended. The front hall department's chief steward Zhang Rang was not in a good state. His neat dark green robe had been torn, and his face was incomparably pale. His originally gloomy aura was now filled with traces of pure yang energy. However, this was not a good thing. His injury was caused by the pure yang astral qi entering his body. For a martial artist like him who originally cultivated in evil techniques, it was a hard injury. It would take a while to heal. However, in front of him, Do Hanwei was already dead. 9 pure yang swords were scattered on the ground. More than half of them had been shattered. Do Hanwei did not fall, but his face was dark green. His body was emitting corpse energy, and there was a big hole in his chest from Zhang Rang's attack. His heart was nowhere to be seen. After the battle, this former disciple of the pure yang Taoist sect was defeated by Zhang Rang. He was defeated, which meant he was dead. He had repaid the Jiang clan's debt of gratitude, even though he had to pay it with his life. As for the other members of Prince Anil's mansion, they were either killed or escaped. The entire Prince Anil's mansion had completely fallen apart. When they saw Chu Xiu return with Jiang Wenyuan's head, everyone present revealed a strange look. They did not expect that the one who killed Jiang Wenyuan would be an outsider like Chu Xiu. This made them feel a little regretful and unconvinced. However, after seeing this scene, Zhang Rang's expression improved a little. His Majesty had asked him to complete this mission. If he had messed it up, then his impression in His Majesty's heart would be lowered. Now that Chu Xiu had returned with Jiang Wenyuan's head, and the rest of the members of Prince Anil's mansion had been mostly killed, Zhang Rang could take these things to report to Lu Haochang. Zhang Rang coughed and said, "Chu Xiu, you've done well this time. I will put in a good word for you in front of His Majesty. The Eastern Qi Imperial Court will not take a single cent of the rewards promised for the Guanzhong torture room mission. Similarly, the few of you have also participated in the killing of Prince Anil's mansion. I, Eastern Qi, will also reward you according to your contributions. Especially Chu Xiu. His Majesty will reward you handsomely for killing Jiang Wenyuan." After Chu Xiu and the others cupped their hands in thanks, Zhang Rang took Jiang Wenyuan's head and left with his men. Chu Xiu was not afraid that Zhang Rang would tamper with the credit, because he did not dare. At his position, there were too many people who had their eyes on him. Therefore, Zhang Rang could be said to be very careful, and did not dare to cross the line. Now that they were in public, everyone knew who the credit should be. Zhang Rang could not be greedy for this kind of credit. When they returned to the inn to rest, Cheng Zhouhai and Zhong Ping were still in a daze. This mission could be said to be the most inexplicable one they had ever carried out. He had completed it inexplicably, and he had even participated in the mission to kill Prince Anil's residents. However, Zhong Ping felt that he had killed quite a lot of people. Si Ming had taught him all kinds of killing techniques since he was young. When it came to investigating cases, he could not compare to Cheng Zhouhai, or even Chu Xiu. However, he was very good at killing people. Therefore, when he took action this time, the number of people who died in Zhong Ping's hands was almost double that of Cheng Zhouhai. 2 days later, the rewards were handed out. It was unknown whether it was because Lu Haochang was generous or because the Eastern Qi Imperial Court was rich and overbearing, but the rewards given to Chu Xiu and the others were very generous. The rewards promised to the Guanzhong torture room were all given by the Eastern Qi Imperial Court. Zhong Ping and Cheng Zhouhai also received a lot of extra rewards according to the number of people they killed. Of course, Zhong Ping received more. As for Chu Xiu, because he killed Jiang Wenyuan, he received the most preferential treatment. In addition to giving Chu Xiu a lot of cultivation resources, the Eastern Qi Imperial Court also gave him an 8-revolution elixir, the 5 elements regeneration elixir. Generally, elixir pills from 1st revolution to 3rd revolution were relatively common, and could be refined by low-level alchemists. But the elixir pills from 4th revolution to 6th revolution not only required the proficiency of the alchemist, but also the accumulation of a lot of precious materials. Even the elixir recipe had to be very strict. A little mistake would lead to the failure of the whole furnace of elixir pills, resulting in heavy losses. Therefore, most of the elixir pills from 4th Revolution to 6th Revolution in Jianghu were only qualified and capable of refining by some big sections. As for the 7 to 9 Revolution pills, they were called divine pills by some people. They had powerful effects and were extremely difficult to concoct. The control of the fire was extremely strict. If the person concocting the pill was a little bit off, he would not be able to succeed. Even most of the elixir pills from 7th Revolution and above were accidentally produced when the elixir masters were refining other elixir pills. The amount of medicine in the elixir recipe had changed in some way, but sometimes this kind of thing could only be found by chance. A lot of materials were consumed. Sometimes it was possible to refine elixir pills, but most of the time, it was a pile of waste. Chu Xiu looked at the 5 elements biotransformation pill with a strange look in his eyes. The royal family of Eastern Qi was really considerate. They knew that he was about to step into the 5 Qis collecting in Yuan realm, so they rushed to give him a 5 elements biotransformation pill. This 5 elements biotransformation pill was refined with 5 extremely precious 5 elements materials. It could balance the power of the 5 elements in one's body. The medicinal efficacy would circulate in one's body in an endless cycle, bringing extremely strong medicinal efficacy to the user. For a martial artist like Chu Xiu who was about to break through to the 5 Qis collecting in Yuan realm, the 5 Qis collecting in Yuan realm was definitely a great help. However, Chu Xiu did not refine it right away. If he wanted to refine a god-tier pill of this level, he would need at least a few days. And now, Chu Xiu had not really polished the 5 Qis collecting in Yuan realm to its peak. When Chu Xiu felt that he was almost ready, he could take this 5 elements biotransformation pill and break through the bottleneck in one fell swoop with the help of the medicinal efficacy. This would save Chu Xiu a lot of time. At this time, Chu Xiaoda also returned and brought news from Shangyang. Cheng Zhouhai and the others did not know when Chu Xiu had hooked up with Chu Xiaoda, but they also knew the ways of the world. Chu Xiaoda had something to say to Chu Xiu, so they temporarily retreated. Chapter 293. The trip to Shangyang County had left a deep impression on Chu Xiaoda. It also made him firmly believe that standing on Chu Xiu's side was the right thing to do. When he brought the 9 branch halls token to Mo Tianlin, Mo Tianlin immediately started investigating Qiu Dongmao for him without a word. In Shangyang County, he had seen the power of the Shangyang Mo family. It was definitely more useful than the Eastern Qi imperial court. All the martial arts forces, big and small, and even the lone cultivators, had to give face to the Shangyang Mo family. It was as if their word was law. At the thought that this power could help him in the future, Chu Xiaoda felt a little excited. Although the 9 branch hall's power was not for nothing, and you had to pay as much as you gained, it was still better than Chu Xiaoda being alone and helpless. Chu Xiu asked in a low voice, "Is there a result from Qiu Dongmao?" Chu Xiaoda nodded and said, "There is a result. There is indeed something wrong with that Qiu Dongmao. A month ago, and even for this whole year, Qiu Dongmao did not go out. He stayed in Shangyang County obediently. But after Qiu Zhenxing rejected the crown prince sent one of his men to see Qiu Dongmao. Since then, Qiu Dongmao has bought many tonics and sent them to Qiu Zhenxing. Qiu Dongmao has done this before, but it was just a way for him to curry favor with Qiu Zhenxing. But this month, he has done it very frequently." A strange look appeared in Chu Xiu's eyes. He had already guessed what was going on. Although the crown prince was rather mediocre, he was not an idiot. It was fine that Qiu Zhenxing stood on the side of the second prince. He could rope in Qiu Zhenxing's son. Of course, the person he wanted to rope in was not Qiu Zhenxing's eldest son, Qiu Dongning, but his illegitimate son, Qiu Dongmao. The poison was indeed from Qiu Dongmao. Chu Xiu could guarantee that the tonics he sent to Qiu Zhenxing contained the poison of the begonia of July. If it were other martial artists, they wouldn't be interested in some ordinary supplements. But Qiu Zhenxing was a simple person. He was the dignified owner of the Pegasus farm, and a great expert at the unity of heaven and man realm. Most of the time, he only ate plain tea and rice. Therefore, he would never waste the things that Qiu Dongmao sent, and would even share them with his family. Without Jiang Wenyuan's interference, Qiu Dongning would have been killed by the July begonia's poison. He would not have been poisoned, but killed by the rebound of his Zhen qi, which was very similar to qi deviation. At that time, Qiu Zhenxing's only way was to bring Qiu Dongmao over and train him as an illegitimate son. Qiu Dongmao had his weakness in the hands of the crown prince. The crown prince could also use Qiu Dongmao to do a lot of things. Unfortunately, a good plan was secretly destroyed by Jiang Wenyuan in the end. Once Qiu Zhenxing died, Qiu Dongmao was no longer of much use. If Qiu Dongmao's strength was a little stronger, the Eastern Qi Imperial Court might let him manage the Pegasus farm. But now Qiu Dongmao had not even reached the innate realm. It was a joke to let Qiu Dongmao manage such a large Pegasus farm. At most, the Eastern Qi Imperial Court would give Qiu Dongmao some glory and wealth so that he could live a stable life. That was all. Of course, Qiu Dongmao was useless to the crown prince, but it was very useful to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu had checked Qiu Zhenxing's farm one by one. Not only did he not find any cultivation method, but even some precious cultivation resources and other things were not found by Chu Xiu. Mr. Liu did not take these things, nor did Qiu Zhenxing, so the only possibility was that he had hidden them. Although Qiu Dongmao was Qiu Zhenxing's illegitimate son, an illegitimate son was still a son, and his strength was no threat to Qiu Zhenxing. In case of emergency or to leave a way out, Qiu Dongmao was very likely to know these things. Thinking of Qiu Dongmao's big reaction when Cheng Zhouhai was investigating the case, this possibility increased a little. After thinking about it, Chu Xiu asked, "Did you find any evidence this time?" Chu Xiaoda shook his head and said, "There was no evidence. The man sent by the crown prince only appeared once and never appeared again. And Qiu Dongmao did a very clean job there, leaving no evidence. Even the July begonia should have been given to him by the crown prince." Chu Xiu nodded. If that was the case, it seemed that he still had to take action. Chu Xiu had coveted the cultivation method in Qiu Zhenxing's hands for a long time, and he did not intend to share it with others. After getting the news, he went to Cheng Zhouhai and the others and said, "Everyone, now that the task in Eastern Qi has been completed, you can go back to the Guanzhong torture room to report." When Cheng Zhouhai heard Chu Xiu say you, he could not help but feel puzzled and asked, "Aren't you going back?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "Although the Eastern Qi Imperial Court said that the case has been closed and the task has been completed, there are still some minor flaws that need to be dealt with at the end. I don't need your help with these. I can handle it myself, and I will go back soon." Hearing Chu Xiu's words, Cheng Zhouhai understood that Chu Xiu still had some personal affairs that needed to be dealt with, but he just wanted to use the Guanzhong torture room as a cover. This kind of thing was harmless. They were not Wang Qianping, who had to make things difficult for Chu Xiu. Making things convenient for others was also convenient for oneself, so Cheng Zhouhai and the others said directly, "Well, we will wait for you in the Guanzhong torture room, Brother Chu. Brother Chu, please rest assured that we will not speak carelessly when we report the situation of the case. Brother Chu, no one can take away your credit." If they went back together, it would naturally be Chu Xiu who would report the situation to Guan Siyu. But now that Chu Xiu was going back a little later, Guan Siyu would certainly ask them first. However, they did not want to become enemies with Chu Xiu, so they naturally would not trick Chu Xiu in this kind of thing. Chu Xiu nodded and said, "I trust the characters of Brother Cheng and the others. In that case, I will take my leave for now." After that, Chu Xiu immediately went to Qiu Zhenxing's manor to find Qiu Dongmao. At this time, Qiu Zhenxing's manor was still sealed by the Dragon Rider's Imperial Army. At present, the matter with Jiang Wenyuan had been resolved, but it was still unknown how to deal with the Pegasus pasture, so the place was still in a state of lockdown. Seeing Chu Xiu arrive, the Dragon Rider's Imperial Army guarding the gate cupped his hands at Chu Xiu and said, "Official Chu." The Dragon Rider's Imperial Army also knew that Chu Xiu had also participated in the battle to kill Jiang Wenyuan. Moreover, he seemed to have a good relationship with their general Fang Jinqi. Therefore, the Dragon Rider's Imperial Army was very polite to Chu Xiu. Looking around, Chu Xiu frowned and said, "Where are Qiu Dongmao and the others?" The Dragon Rider Imperial Army shook his head and said, "I don't know. Yesterday, he was here to keep watch for his father. However, after learning of Jiang Wenyuan's death, He left with the 5 heroes of Jiangdong overnight. Chu Xiu frowned and said, "Left? Where did they go?" The Dragon Rider Imperial Army said, looking at the direction, "It should be the west. I heard them say that they wanted to hurry to the Black Glazed City in the west as soon as possible." Black Glazed City? What was Qiu Dongmao doing there? Half of this so-called Black Glazed City was actually a mine. Its most famous production was a strange gemstone called Black Glazed. It was cold all over and could be used as a precious ornament. It could also be used to set up formations, and was very expensive. In Chu Xiu's opinion, Qiu Dongmao should have either returned to Shangyang, or went to Eastern Qi's Great Liang City to seek refuge with the Crown Prince. Why would he go there? But then Chu Xiu realized that Qiu Dongmao had gone to Black Glazed City to seek refuge with the Crown Prince. The princes of Eastern Qi all had considerable power, and each had their own fiefdoms. If Chu Xiu remembered correctly, Black Glazed City was one of the Crown Prince's fiefdoms. Shangyang was used by Qiu Zhenxing to settle Qiu Dongmao. Naturally, he didn't want to go back. In Great Liang City, the Crown Prince was reprimanded by the Emperor of Eastern Qi, Lu Haochang. He was now in closed-door meditation. Qiu Dongmao's identity was a little sensitive, so he naturally didn't want to see Qiu Dongmao. Black Glazed City was the Crown Prince's fiefdom, and the place where Black Glazed was produced. It could be said that it was very important to the Crown Prince. The Crown Prince had a lot of power there. If Qiu Dongmao went there, his safety would be guaranteed. At the same time, the Crown Prince would have to arrange an escape route for him. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows. Qiu Dongmao was quite smart. He must have sensed some danger and left in a hurry. But how could Chu Xiu let go of something that he had his eyes on so easily? Qiu Dongmao wouldn't be able to escape from Chu Xiu's palm. At this time, on the way to Black Glazed City, the 5 heroes of Jiangdong escorted Qiu Dongmao all the way to Black Glazed City. This was also the last time they would escort Qiu Dongmao. This time, the 5 heroes of Jiangdong came here for 2 reasons. One was to protect Qiu Dongmao, the only son of their benefactor, and the other was to avenge their benefactor, Qiu Zhenxing. But now that the Eastern Qi Imperial Court had announced that Prince Anil, Jiang Wenyuan, had colluded with diabolism to kill Qiu Zhenxing, they naturally didn't need to avenge Qiu Dongmao. They could leave after escorting Qiu Dongmao on his last journey. Qiu Dongmao walked in a hurry along the way as if someone was chasing him. In fact, he was afraid. He knew that Jiang Wenyuan and the Crown Prince were working together. But he never expected that the people from the Guanzhong torture room would find out about the Crown Prince and directly take down Jiang Wenyuan. Since the Guanzhong torture room could find out about Jiang Wenyuan, would they find out about him too? Qiu Dongmao couldn't guarantee this. Especially the leader of the Guanzhong torture room, Chu Xiu. Every time he saw Chu Xiu, Qiu Dongmao felt a sense of fear. In front of him, he seemed to be naked and could be seen through at any time. So after receiving the news of Jiang Wenyuan's death and the destruction of Prince Anil's residence, Qiu Dongmao secretly sent a message to the Crown Prince. The person told him not to come to Daliang City, but to go to Black Glazed City first. Once there, the Crown Prince would make arrangements. Of course, the actual situation was that the Crown Prince, LV Longji, was a little overwhelmed. He didn't have the time to care about Qiu Dongmao. He would first throw Qiu Dongmao to Black Glazed City. But at this time, among the people who had been quietly rushing along, Wu Tiandong suddenly asked curiously, "Young Master Qiu, why are you in such a hurry to go to Black Glazed City?" Chapter 294. The Jiangdong 5 heroes had a good impression of Qiu Dongmao. In their eyes, Qiu Dongmao was humble, polite and filial. Apart from his slightly weaker strength, he was far better than Qiu Zhenxing's eldest son, Qiu Dongning. They had gotten along well on the way to the Ji State Prefecture. So when Qiu Dongmao mentioned going to Glazed Ink City, they agreed without hesitation. Under Qiu Dongmao's urging, they did not even ask why Qiu Dongmao was in such a hurry. Now that Wu Tiandong asked, the others also looked at Qiu Dongmao with curious eyes. Qiu Dongmao didn't panic in the face of everyone's stares. After such a long time, he had already thought of an excuse. Qiu Dongmao sighed and said, "In fact, when Jiang Wenyuan died, I had already guessed the cause of my father's death. My father was not killed by Jiang Wenyuan, but by the internal strife of the Eastern Qi royal family. My father was the owner of the Pegasus farm, and was very important to Eastern Qi, so both the crown prince and the second prince wanted to recruit my father. However, my father was very strict with the rules. The crown prince was the heir, so he naturally had to stand on the crown prince's side. As a result, the second prince bore a grudge against him. Not only did he send someone to kill my father, he even invited Chu Xiu from the Guanzhong torture room to distort the truth. Chu Xiu had secretly come to the Zhuangzi and secretly contacted General Fang Jinqi of the Dragon Riders' Imperial Army. Fang Jinqi was one of the second prince's men. You know what happened next? Under the second prince's schemes, Prince Anil, Jiang Wenyuan, was killed, and the crown prince was reprimanded by His Majesty and ordered to go into seclusion. The ones who really benefited were the second prince and Chu Xiu. You all know Prince Anil's reputation. He was kind and courteous. How could he have colluded with demons and killed my father? All of this was just an excuse. Now that King Enlu is dead and His Highness the Crown Prince is heavily injured, I'm worried that the second prince's subordinates will collude with Chu Xiu and attack me. That's why I left in a hurry, wanting to go to Glazed Ink City. That is the Crown Prince's fief, and is protected by many masters under the Crown Prince's command. Neither the second prince nor Chu Xiu would dare to act rashly. Qiu Dongmao was a genius. In a short period of time, he had thought of all these excuses and completely turned the situation around. Everything he said was the truth, but everyone's standpoint had changed completely, so it seemed abnormally real. Furthermore, Qiu Dongmao was right. The crown prince had indeed been reprimanded and reprimanded. Chu Xiu had indeed come to the manor that day, and had a secret meeting with Fang Jinqi. They had all seen it. As for Jiang Wenyuan, he had a good reputation in the martial arts world of Eastern Qi. Most importantly, Jiang Wenyuan was famous for being courteous and courteous. At least for most of the individual cultivators and warriors, Prince Anil was indeed a man worth following. The 5 freaks of Jiangdong also admired Jiang Wenyuan's reputation. If they were not motivated to be chivalrous and help the needy, they might have joined Jiang Wenyuan's team. This time, when they heard that Chu Xiu killed Jiang Wenyuan, their hatred for Chu Xiu deepened. However, because the Eastern Qi Imperial Court announced that Jiang Wenyuan had colluded with demons, Chu Xiu's killing of Jiang Wenyuan was for the martial arts world. This made them have no excuse to curse Chu Xiu in secret. Now, according to Qiu Dongmao, all of this was a conspiracy between the second prince and Chu Xiu. The 5 freaks of Jiangdong looked at each other. They did not expect that things would change in this way. Qiu Zhenqing's death was involved in the internal strife of the royal family of Eastern Qi. The few of them were all rogue cultivators. Their strength was not bad, but they had never seen such a big scene. They had only heard of the drama of the royal family's internal strife in movies. They did not expect to encounter it themselves. Qing Buhui sighed and said, "Master Qiu, please restrain your grief. I only regret that we are not capable enough to avenge our benefactor." According to Qiu Zhenqing, the real murderer was the second prince, but they could not really kill the second prince of Eastern Qi and then be hunted by the whole world, could they? Moreover, even if they wanted to, they did not have the strength to do so. Qiu Dongmao shook his head with red eyes and said, "Don't worry, Master Cheng. His Royal Highness is a generous man. When His Royal Highness ascends the throne in the future, he will avenge my father." Qing Buhui nodded and looked at the sky. "It's getting late. If I remember correctly, there is an inn in front. Let's go and have a rest." Qiu Dongmao gave it some thought and nodded in agreement. He was very anxious when he left a few days ago, afraid that Chu Xiu would find him. However, he heard from some travelers that the Eastern Qi royal family had closed the case and confirmed that Qiu Zhenqing was killed by Jiang Wenyuan. If that was the case, did it mean that he was safe for the time being? Moreover, he did not see anyone chasing after him for the past few days, which made Qiu Dongmao feel relieved. It was time for him to rest. Cheng Buhui and the others were all at the 5 Qis collecting in the Origin realm, and the 3 flowers at Prominence realm. It would not be a problem for them to travel for a month, let alone a few days. However, Qiu Dongmao was only at the blood condensation realm, and his own strength was very weak. A few days of continuous travel was already too much for him. After walking along the official road for less than an hour, there was indeed a small inn on the side. Cheng Buhui and the others pushed the door open and entered. There were not many people, only some traveling merchants and some lone cultivators. Seeing Cheng Buhui and the others come in, the eyes of the people in the inn suddenly lit up. A few people took the initiative to come over and salute. "May I ask if you are the 5 heroes of Jiangdong?" Cheng Buhui and the others smiled and saluted, "Yes." Qiu Dongmao frowned slightly behind them. He still did not want them to reveal their whereabouts. If there were really people following them, it would be easy to find out their whereabouts from these lone cultivators. However, since Cheng Buhui and the others had already spoken, he could not stop them. The few lone cultivators were immediately overjoyed when they heard this. They said, "I have long heard of the famous 5 heroes of Jiangdong. Now that I have seen you today, you 5 heroes are indeed extraordinary. We are truly blessed." As they spoke, they immediately began to flatter them. Not only were Cheng Buhui and the others famous in the land of Jiangdong, but they were also quite famous in Eastern Qi. Moreover, the 5 of them had such unique characteristics that they were easily recognized. Some of these unaffiliated martial artists had not even reached the innate realm. If they went to greet other martial artists in the 3-flower realm, or the 5 Qis gathering in the origin realm, they would probably be ignored. However, Cheng Buhui and the others were also unaffiliated martial artists, so they did not have that many bad habits. They were very friendly and greeted everyone one by one. Seeing the attitude of Cheng Buhui and the others, the lone cultivators present were also amazed. As expected of the 5 heroes of Jiangdong, just their temperament alone was different from other martial artists. After exchanging greetings with the martial artists present, Cheng Buhui immediately ordered a pile of food and asked the innkeeper to book a few superior rooms for them, so that they could rest after the meal. However, just as they were about to finish their meal, the door of the inn was suddenly pushed open. A cold aura with the smell of blood suddenly drifted inside, causing everyone present to shiver uncontrollably. "Qiu Dongmao, you have quite an appetite. Your father's body is still warm, and he has not been buried yet. Instead of burying him, you are still in the mood to eat here. You sure have a big heart." A figure stepped into the inn. His black clothes seemed to have merged with the night outside. Even the long saber at his waist was surrounded by pitch-black demonic qi, exuding a sense of deathly stillness. "Chu Xiu!" Qiu Dongmao exclaimed, and the chopsticks in his hand fell to the ground. When everyone present heard the 2 words Chu Xiu, they could not help but shiver. Today, not only did they see the famous 5 heroes of Jiangdong in Eastern Qi, but they also saw the infamous Chu Xiu in the land of Eastern Qi. What day was today? Why did they all come here? It had not been long since the God Weapon Conference. The deeds that Chu Xiu had done in the Ji State Prefecture were still circulating in the land of Eastern Qi. To exaggerate, his reputation in Eastern Qi was even greater than in Guangzhou. The moment he saw Chu Xiu, Cheng Buhui immediately pulled out the heavy sword on his back. The other 4 also pulled out their weapons and looked at Chu Xiu with vigilance. Looking at the 5 heroes of Jiangdong, Chu Xiu said calmly, "Do you know who you are protecting now? He is a guy who dared to poison his own father, and wanted to kill his own brother to take over the throne. He is a cruel and merciless man. Qiu Zhenqing's case is not over yet." Although Qiu Zhenqing died in the hands of Jiang Wenyuan, young Master Qiu added fuel to the fire. Now, on behalf of the Guangzhou Torture Room and the Eastern Qi Imperial Court, I want to arrest him and bring him to justice. By protecting him, are you going against the order of the Eastern Qi Imperial Court? Wu Tiandong sneered and said, "Chu Xiu, we already know the truth. You can fool others with your high-sounding reasons, but don't try to fool us." Cheng Buhui also said in a low voice, "Chu Xiu, when it's possible to let someone off, one should spare them. You've already obtained enough by cooperating with the second prince. Prince Enlu is dead, and His Highness the Crown Prince has been punished by His Majesty. You've already obtained enough rewards. At present, young Master Qiu is no longer a threat to you. He is just the last bloodline of our benefactor. Do you really have to kill him?" Hearing the specious words of Cheng Buhui and the others, Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and looked at Qiu Dongmao. This guy must have said something to the 5 heroes of Jiangdong, otherwise, the 5 of them would not have such an attitude. At this time, Qiu Dongmao also looked at Chu Xiu fearlessly. He was not afraid that Chu Xiu would tell the truth. First impressions were the strongest. Would the 5 heroes of Jiangdong believe him, who had always been on good terms with them? Or would they believe Chu Xiu, who was notorious and had conflicts with them? There was no doubt about it. Chapter 295. The conversation between Chu Xiu, Cheng Buhui, and the others left everyone dumbfounded. They seemed to have heard something extraordinary. What they had talked about before was actually related to the recent case of Qiu Zhensheng, the owner of the Pegasus Ranch, the struggle between the princes of Eastern Qi, and the death of Jiang Wenyuan, the prince of Anil. It sounded like something extraordinary. They did not even dare to listen to such a big gossip. Chu Xiu squinted at Qiu Zhensheng and said lightly, "You are clever. These 5 stupid guys have been fooled by you, haven't they? Since you are prepared, I will also give you a chance. I can promise not to kill you, but you have to tell me where all the things left by Qiu Zhensheng are. Jiang Wenyuan sent someone to kill Qiu Zhensheng, and I killed Jiang Wenyuan. It can be regarded as revenge for him. It is reasonable for me to ask for some compensation, isn't it?" Qiu Dongmao was taken aback. He had thought that Chu Xiu had been sent by the second prince to kill him, or that the matter of him giving the Qiu family July begonia had been exposed. But now, it seemed that Chu Xiu had acted on his own. Even so, Qiu Dongmao did not intend to admit it. Now that Qiu Zhensheng was dead, as the only son of Qiu Zhensheng, those things would naturally be left to him. These were one of his future assets. How could he just give them to Chu Xiu? Moreover, he did not know whether Chu Xiu was telling the truth or not. Even if Chu Xiu was telling the truth and he admitted it, the 5 people around him might immediately attack and directly tear him into pieces. Although the 5 heroes of Jiangdong were benevolent and righteous, they were warriors who had been in Jianghu for so many years and had killed many people. If they found out that he was lying to them, there was no need to think about what would happen to him next. However, before Qiu Dongmao could speak, Wu Tiandong had already pointed at Chu Xiu with a knife and shouted, "Bastard! Who are you calling an idiot?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "Don't add drama. I didn't say that you are idiots. I just said that you are a little stupid." Although Wu Tiandong did not know what drama meant, he could tell from Chu Xiu's attitude and voice that what Chu Xiu said was probably not good. Qiu Dongmao pulled Wu Tiandong aside and said to Chu Xiu in a deep voice, "Chu Xiu, you don't have to lie to me. I've already told the heroes about your conspiracy with the second prince. Don't even think about doing anything about it. Now that my father's body is still cold, I naturally feel guilty, but if I continue to stay in G state, I will have to go to the underworld to accompany my father. But now, I have the protection of the 5 Chu Xiu, and you Xiu Xiu King and Xiu Xiu Xiu, and then Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "You refuse a toast only to drink a forfeit. In fact, I will not do things to the extreme every time. This time, I gave you a chance, but you did not cherish it. You can't blame me for this." He pulled out the heavenly demon dance from his waist, and in an instant, the cold devil chi lingered in the entire inn, causing the other warriors in the inn to immediately retreat in panic. If they were seriously injured because of watching the show, it would not be worth it. In fact, this time, Chu Xiu was really going to give Qiu Dongmao a chance, because he only wanted the martial arts in Qiu Zhensheng's hands. As for other things, Chu Xiu was not interested. Maybe before Qiu Zhensheng died, he did not expect that the martial arts he accidentally obtained would have such power. Qiu Dongmao naturally did not know, and Chu Xiu was not worried that he would leak anything. As long as the other party was willing to cooperate obediently, Chu Xiu did not mind letting him live. But it was a pity that Qiu Dongmao chose a dead end, so he could not blame Chu Xiu for being cruel and merciless. Seeing Chu Xiu pull out his saber, Cheng Buhui and the other 4 immediately stood in front of Qiu Dongmao, not retreating at all. Chu Xiu said in a low voice, "Are you really going to stop me? You should know that behind me stands the Guanzhong torture room and the Eastern Qi Imperial Court. I said that Qiu Dongmao was one of the murderers of Qiu Zhenqing. No matter whether there is evidence or not, the Eastern Qi Imperial Court will believe it, the Guanzhong torture room will believe it, and so will the people in Jianghu. Now only you don't believe it. In the end, the reputation of the 5 freaks of River East will be ruined as well. Cheng Buhui said in a low voice, when the 5 of us became sworn brothers, we once said that when we see injustice, we do chivalry and help the weak. What we seek is not fame, but peace of mind. The title of the 5 freaks of River East is not what we want. We are all people in Jianghu who favor us. Now if they want to take it back, we have no objection, as long as we have a clear conscience. The person I, Cheng Buhui, admire the most in this life is the previous hall master of the Guanzhong torture room, great hero Chu Kuanga. He used martial arts to stop war. Even if there were millions of people, he would still go forward. But you, Chu Xiu, are now using the name of the Guanzhong torture room for your own selfish desires. You are blinded by greed and indiscriminately killed the innocent. You are not a member of the Guanzhong torture room. Chu Xiu shook his head. Stubborn and stubborn. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu's body moved. Without any warning, he slashed towards the 5 of them with his saber. The surging demonic aura was mixed with boundless blood qi. The might of this attack was simply extremely demonic. Cheng Buhui shouted, Lao Lao San, you too attack. As soon as he finished speaking, second brother, Dong Xiangyi, and third brother, blood avoidance sword Lu Tong, had already rushed out. Cheng Buhui had seen Chu Xiu attack before. Although the 4th prince, Wu Tiandong, was not the top among those in the 3-flower realm, he was still not bad. However, he could not even block one move from Chu Xiu. Therefore this time, Cheng Buhui did not want Wu Tiandong and Lu Qingqing, who were both in the 3-flower realm, to attack. Instead, he asked second brother and third brother, who were in the 5 Qi's origin realm, to attack. He stayed in the back to coordinate, afraid that other pursuers would come. The 5 freaks of River East were so famous in the land of Eastern Qi not only because of their chivalrous deeds, but also because they were not weak themselves. The weapon in second brother, Dong Xiangyi's hand was very strange. He usually held a fan and wore a brocade robe, looking like the son of an aristocratic family. But at this time when he attacked, blood-colored blades shot out from the folding fan. When they flew across the sky, the blood-colored gang qi extended for dozens of feet. Dong Xiangyi's accumulation of gang qi was also extremely powerful. He had almost reached the peak of the 5 qis collecting in mind. As for third brother, blood avoidance sword, Lu Tong, his attack was a standard swordsman's style. His sword technique was fast and strange. He stabbed out with a thin sword in his hand, and the sword momentum was so fast that it was impossible to see the traces. In all fairness, these 2 people were not weak. Chu Xiu had also fought against martial artists in the 5 Qi's origin realm, such as Wei Mok from the 9 Plains Wei family. However, in terms of strength, Dong Xiangyi and Lu Tong were both above Wei Mok. Chu Xiu pinched the internal binding seal and quickly retreated. As soon as Lu Tong's extremely fast sword momentum missed, the folding fan in Dong Xiangyi's hand came over with an extremely sharp blood-colored gang qi. However, this time, Chu Xiu did not retreat. The heavenly demon dance in his hand drew a magnificent arc. The blood-refined divine aura contained pure demonic qi, which directly shattered Dong Xiangyi's gang qi. Dong Xiangyi slashed out with his long saber and waved the folding fan in his hand. Blood-colored gang qi turned into a hurricane cyclone and stopped in front of him. Although he was forced to retreat by Chu Xiu's attacks, he still managed to block Chu Xiu's attacks. However, at this time, Dong Xiangyi's expression was very ugly. One had to know that he was in the 5 Qi's origin realm, while Chu Xiu was in the 3-flower realm, which was 1 realm lower than him. In the end, he was the one being suppressed. How aggrieved was this? Right at this moment, a wave of killing intent came from behind Chu Xiu. Lu Tong's figure shot out explosively towards Chu Xiu like an arrow. His entire person and the sword in his hand seemed to have fused into one, making him extremely sharp and filled with boundless killing intent. Chu Xiu turned around and pinched a seal with his hand. The wisdom fist seal covered all directions, and heaven and earth were useless. In an instant, the stellar energy around Chu Xiu's body began to stagnate. LV Tong's extremely swift sword momentum and his sharp sword intent were consumed by the inescapable net laid out by the Wisdom Fist seal. The originally extremely swift attack now seemed to be in slow motion. Chu Xiu turned around and slashed with his sword. The Avicii Hell's Devil Chi roared out and directly blasted Lu Tong away. Feng Buhui, who was standing behind, frowned. Back in the God Weapon Conference, he was famous in the pugilistic world and ranked in the top 10 of the Longhu list. He truly deserved his reputation. He had underestimated Chu Xiu. As a 3-flower realm martial artist in the 5 Chi's origin realm, and 1 against 2, Chu Xiu was not at a disadvantage at all. Instead, he seemed to be at ease. This kind of strength could be said to be terrifying. Cheng Buhui said to Wu Tiandong and Lu Qingqing in a deep voice, "You two protect young Master Qiu. I'll do it." As soon as he finished speaking, Cheng Buhui directly took out the heavy sword on his back. The sword fell to the ground, and everyone could feel the ground tremble. The lone cultivators present were secretly speechless. What was this heavy sword made of? It didn't look too exaggerated, so why was it so heavy? Cheng Buhui held the sword with both hands and directly slashed at Chu Xiu. Ordinary swords were used to stab, and their main purpose was to be sharp and agile. However, this heavy sword in Cheng Buhui's hands was like a large machete. It was extremely heavy. With just a simple move, splitting Huashan Mountain, there was no release of vigor qi. Instead, the plain and invisible vigor qi condensed on the body of his sword. It condensed and did not dissipate, as if it was real. As the sword fell, the surrounding air seemed to be compressed. With a heavy force, it made a violent sonic boom. Chu Xiu also felt the power of Cheng Buhui's sword. His figure moved, and his hand formed the inner binding seal. His figure quickly retreated, and in the blink of an eye, he was already outside the inn. When Cheng Buhui's sword fell to the ground, everyone in the inn suddenly felt as if they had experienced an earthquake. The sword directly cut a huge pit several meters wide in the ground. The cracks were densely packed, and they directly extended outside the inn. The front half of the inn's door directly shattered with a loud bang. At that moment, Chu Xiu's voice came from outside. 5 heroes of Jiangdong, are you determined to protect Qiu Dongmao? Don't worry, the show hasn't started yet. I hope you won't regret it in the future. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.